Greetings, chess fans. I'm Arturs Neiksans, the leading Latvian chess grandmaster, and I'm continuing my educational video series called GM Neiksans Boot Camp. In this video series, I am trying to teach to a wider audience either brand new opening or some deeper concepts in the middle game, sometimes also end games. And episode number 47 will be devoted for the London system. The London system is a very popular continuation these days, mainly due to the fact that it's very easy to set up from the white's perspective. So white wants to play d4, bishop f4, knight f3, e3, bishop d3, c3, and knight e2. Yeah, so I'm going to show you that in a moment, but the idea is pretty clear. And the question is, what is its current reputation? Because the London system very often is hated between many chess fans. And I think that this hate or dislike for the opening comes because it seemingly requires no effort for white to play it, and white can do it against pretty much anything. Well, with this bootcamp, I will prove otherwise, that I don't think that the London system works against anything that black can throw at you, and I will explain you where are the nuances and what I would advise you in which direction to look at. Quite funnily, that in my childhood, when I first experienced the London system, it was not called London back then, because I come from Latvia. We have many Russian-speaking citizens living here, and between the kids, it will be called svinya in Russian language. That's called, in direct translation, piggy opening. But yeah, like, it was not very seriously looked upon until things changed in the recent times when Magnus Carlsen started to play it at the highest level. And I think the reason why Magnus started to play it is because he was looking for a fresher game. Because at the professional level, at the highest level, everything is sort of already analyzed to some extent. And for Magnus, it was like a fresh breeze, some fresh positions that have not yet been analyzed. That was like maybe 5 years ago or so, maybe even more than that. But nowadays, the theory of the London Opening has already caught up, and yeah, I think that the top players have essentially moved on. However, this trend has stayed with the club level players, and they really like it due to its simplicity. Some of the greatest practitioners of the London system, as already said, they're Magnus Carlsen, but also, for example, Gata Kamsky. He pretty much exclusively has been playing the London system for his entire life. And Gata Kamsky, I mean, he was one of the world's best players at his prime. And yeah, so in case you want to study some games, I suggest you to look at his games to have a better feeling. So the bootcamp and my directions, they were influenced by Kamsky's approach. Some of them I like, some of them I'm not entirely sure, but you'll see. So what does this episode consist of? I'm planning to have 6 parts. So this is the introduction part. I'm going to show you how the moves look like. So we're going to have 6 parts. Part number 1 is going to be Queen's Gambit declined with c5 and Queen b6. Yeah, let me maybe show you. So let's say here, Black plays c5, Black plays Queen b6, or Black plays Knight c6, and then proceeds to play Queen b6, because this is one of the most ambitious approaches for Black. Try to immediately ask you a lot of direct questions with the pawn on d4. Part number 2 will deal with c5 and mostly c5, but not Queen b6. And Black is going to be aiming for something else. Part number 3 will be aiming at Queen's Gambit declined and other setups. We'll be looking at the exchange variation, c takes on d4, the bishop goes to either 5 or g4. Sometimes black also plays knight h5, tries to kill the bishop in f4. Part number 4 will be, I hope I got them in the right order, will be the Slav setup with c6. And I'll explain what our approach is going to change. Part number 5 is the Queen's Indian defense. So here we're going to start to look at black's knight f6, e6, b6, and bishop b7, or something, even bishop a6, and I will explain what is the difference. And part number 6 will be devoted for g6. All right? All right, so first and foremost, what is the classical setup for white in the London? We are going to start with knight f3. And the reason of knight f3 and not bishop f4, because London very often has been understood that bishop f4 is the classical London, and knight f3, bishop f4 is like already, I don't know, like a delayed London, still the good old London. I believe that after bishop f4, black has some unnecessary options. Meaning, there's a very good chance that you're still going to transpose to the same positions, but black can play c5. And after c5, e3, knight c6, that's the most ambitious way to play. For example, if you play knight f3, black plays bishop g4, and he's already threatening to take on d4, play queen b6, apply pressure here against the pawn on b2 and d4. So let's say you play c3, and this gives black a pretty good version of the exchange Caracan. And by the way, speaking about exchange Caracan, I would strongly advise you to watch my bootcamp episode number 10, which I did like 4 years ago, because I was writing a course for the modern chess. I think it was after that, or before that. I already don't remember. And I was quite big on this particular setup. And I do think that this is not the best version of the exchange Caracan, meaning black can put the bishop on d6, and here the important nuance is to play knight g to e7, and he wants to play something like f6, e5 at some point, maybe not immediately because there's some tricks, but that's the big idea, and black equalizes with no problems. So I think in your best interest is that the black knight gets on f6 and not on e7, so that he's not flexible with this attack. And if you want to avoid this, if you want to avoid the setup and play c3, and now you're saying that bishop g4 is no longer there, black puts the bishop here. Let's say you play knight e2, e6 here, and black has c4. This is a very important position. Now, we are going to have it a couple of times in this bootcamp. So the one who advances the c-pawn forward typically gains some space advantage, and you don't have access to queen c2. And these positions can be pretty dangerous because black can play b5, knight f6, knight e7, knight b6, knight a4. Or I'm not even talking about the b4 push, right? So it's not great. And I think that black immediately achieves everything he wanted. And yeah, I mean, you can try to trade the light square bishop. For example, I didn't thoroughly check it like this. Again, queen b6 is a move, but let's say even e6 and bishop d3, you just get nothing here. So for the sake of simplicity, of course, you can do this. You can play the clean London against everything, but I think that the c5 and knight c6 is the problematic idea. And this is the reason why I'm recommending you to start with knight f3. Because after knight f3, you accomplish a couple of things. First, black, he's not quite there to play c5, meaning he could do that, but this is not the best setup. You play c4, and now there's a very good chance that the position is going to get to some Tarrasch-like positions, which in general has a very good reputation for white. Yeah, so let's say black plays e6. Yeah, probably that's the most ambitious move, because I think these lines, c takes, very important line is queen d5, knight c3, knight e4. White is just always slightly better. Even though we have a symmetrical pawn structure on the board, you're always pressing a bit. The same applies also for let's say knight f6, knight e4, e4, again, symmetrical position. Black is relying on some tricks with queen d4 and knight c2 fork. And again, even if you lose a castle opportunity, all you need to know is that Stockfish just favors your position pretty much all the time, because the knight on a6 for black is misplaced. So ultimately, he would have to play e6. And now you just take on d5 and play g3. I think this is by far the simplest setup you can play against the Tarrasch. Bishop g2, castles, knight c3, and again, there's the bishop g5 move to threaten to take on f6. You either force black to take on d4 or move past the d pawn by playing c5, c4. But after d takes, this is the old continuation. I think it's still pretty good. You want to play most like bishop c5 or put something on d4, and essentially you're forcing your opponent to play an IQP, which is an isolated pawn on d5. Yeah, so that's why c5 it doesn't feel to be optimal to me. And also, what I really like about the move knight f3, we are gonna play bishop 4 next, in case you're worried. We don't reveal our cards. That's the best part, because very often knight f3, especially at the competitive chess, is the preparing move for c4. Because, for example, if you would play the classical Queen's Gambit with c4, there is quite a popular setup for black to play d takes on c4. And let's say you proceed to play either e3 or e4. Let's say e3, black plays e5. For example, there's this opportunity, and black is doing fine. So by playing knight f3, very often you are like saying that I'm going to play c4 anyway, right? Let's say black continues with knight f6 and you're a big fan of the Queen's Gambit client. You play c4, d takes e3, and now black misses out, actually, these opportunities to push e5. So that's why for d4 practitioners, d4 and knight f3 very often is a good move order, because again, you don't reveal your cards, and you might as well play the London where, and this is where it gets the best part, black commits to knight f6, and he does not always get to the c5 lines because he's committed to knight f6 and not knight g7. Do you understand it? Like, I know it's a bit complex, but I show you those lines in exchange, Carol. Exchange, Carol, cost, but whatever. Like, these are very, very similar topics, but you understand the point. So black plays knight f6, not suspecting anything, and now we play bishop 4. So I do think that this is a better version of the London. So what I was saying is that black's typical approach here is to play e6, because this is how many players play from black. If they don't have anything serious prepared against d4, they like to play Queen's Gambit decline. d5, e6, knight f6, bishop e7, show castle. Yeah, you would be surprised how many players play like this. So now we play e3, we play bishop d3, knight e2, that's the setup I'm talking about. So very often black plays something like c5, we play c3, and black plays knight c6. Yeah, that's the classical setup for black. And your typical ideas here will involve going for a kingston attack. I think that's the most promising way. Of course, you can castle short. Like, you can castle short, you can play queen e2, you can play h3, a3, whatever. But I think that knight e5 is really nice. And unlike some other openings, in the London, you can keep your king in the center for the time being, because there's a chance you're going to castle actually the long side. And speaking about the castling necessity, why are we castling in the first place? Well, to secure the king's safety, right? And if the king is feeling secure in the center, so maybe there's no need for you to castle at all. So after knight e5, this opens up you some possibilities, like I'm talking about queen f3, queen h3. You try to target the pawn on h7. A very common maneuver is also h4, h5, h6. You provoke h6, and then you try to demolish it with g4, g5, and you're already thinking about castling long. But let's say black plays knight takes on e5. Typically, I mean, not always, but typically, you want to take with the d-pawn so that you get rid of the knight on f6, knight e7, and now your queen is going to join the attack, The best square for the queen is typically g4, but it's a good idea for you to provoke a weakness. Yeah, you play queen h5, try to provoke a weakness. I mean, h6 is just asking for some trouble. Yeah, some sacrifice on f6, like either bishop h6 or g4, g5. It just doesn't feel right to me. So I think that black has to play something like g6. You play here. Now the threat is to play h4, h5, and potentially some sacrifice ideas on g6. So I think that most players, they're going to panic, and they're going to play something like f5, feel the heat. You take an f6, you expose it, and there you go. And this is probably already an ideal setup for you. h4, h5, long castle, and just continue to expose the black king. So this will be your typical approach against somebody who does not know what is the London or what to play against it. So I think it's going to work perfectly fine until something like 1500 level or so. Yeah. So the topic, the things I'm going to be discussing, you know how it goes. It typically is quite advanced. So I'm aiming this for the advanced players. But at the same time, I try to explain it in language so that everybody understands it. And let's say black does not do this. Let's say black plays, where I think it was here. Yeah, this b6. A very common idea for black is try to kill off this last square bishop on d3 because that's an instrumental piece. So typically you can slow it down with queen e2. c5, he's threatening to trap your bishop. Of course, you don't let it. You play c3. And as a principle, and this is again quite important, as a principle, you want to take on d4 with the e pawn, because you keep the queen side closed and you're still going for this attack. Let's say c takes, as you can see, my pawn chain, my arrow, it shows at the king side, it shows direction at the king side. This means so you want to go for the king side attack. Again, this knight e5, h4, h5, sometimes rook h3, rook h3, rook g3 is going to be a thing. And for black, it's very difficult to play this if he doesn't know what he's doing. So that's why, let's say he does something like this. Again, we put the knight on e5, knight c6, and there's this common idea of h4. Yeah, so you're threatening to play h5, h6, maybe rook h3, and just keep the king for the time being in the center. And if you have to, castle the long side. But again, remember, there's no rule that says that you have to castle just because this opportunity is there. The rule is you have to secure your king. And if the king is feeling secure in the center, by all means, do it. So let's say again, this knight e5, you already saw this. There's a bit different idea. Let's say black blocks the e4 square. This is something you should watch out for. But queen g4, again, remember what I told you, the g4 square is typically the best square for the white queen. And you're threatening some bishop h6 ideas. And after king h8, knight f3, again, you're threatening stuff like knight g5, maybe a long castle, threat to take on e4, and black is already on the defensive. Yeah, maybe here black could try to play a5, which sometimes is the preparation move to force the bishops off the board. And even if this happens, I think it's not a big deal. You still play h5. Again, c takes on d4 is going to be e takes on d4. You keep the queen side closed. And after h6, I think for black it's quite scary to allow h6 and weaken so many dark squares at the king side. If he plays h6, this is very classic. Yeah, this g4, maybe sacrifice a pawn if you have to. Don't worry about that. Like, it's a very, very easy pawn sacrifice. And you just put the other rook on g1, play knight e5, and this already looks close to lost. Yeah. So, for example, in this particular position, rook g7, rook g1 is killing. There's no king h7 because of queen d3, king h8, bishop h6, and there's no rook g8 because of fork, and black is losing. Yeah, so takes here, queen d3, knight e4. There's actually a spectacular line following after this, but black is just completely toast. Yeah, sometimes also in these positions you can try to preserve your bishop. I didn't really check, is it possible here? There is a moment when you can play c3, bishop a6, and keep the bishop here in c2. Let's say c5, knight f3, keep the bishop's long-range capabilities, queen f3, h4, h5, and this bishop at a6. It looks strong, but you're not going to castle short anyway. Yeah, so maybe you can just ignore it and Who knows? Maybe you're going to castle alongside if you have to. All right. That being said, we are over the introduction. And let's talk about the first part, which is what happens if your opponent plays c5 and queen b6. It's a very popular approach. Like he's trying to get the pawns on d4 and b2. And it's also, I think, one of the best approaches that black can do. So after c5, we're going to play e3. By the way, speaking about this c5, I hope I won't forget it. There is a move, e6, followed by the move bishop d6. But I think I'm going to talk about it in the next part. I'm a bit confused which moves are where, because you have to pardon me. Like, even if I'm a pretty good player, these move transpositions, especially in the London, they can get confusing because black can play it out in million ways. But what you should understand is that one of the best setups for black to fight for the center, it's either c5, queen b6, or bishop d6, c5, queen c7, and knight d7, and push e5. So black wants to push e5 and take away this e5 square, which is your catalyst for a potential kingside attack. But anyway, let's start with the move c5. Black wants to play queen b6. We're going to play e3. And in this position, as soon as you lock your bishop out and your bishop stands on f4, you always have to watch out for knight h5. So knight h5 here is not a threat, but by definition, you should understand that you never ever want to give up your Daxwa bishop for black's knight without a very good price. So there needs to be something. You either provoke some weaknesses or you force your opponent to lose tempi. You should get something in return. So if your opponent is able to play knight h5, bishop g3, and just take on g3, it's a bad situation for you. So for example, here, I didn't really check this particular line, but I think something like bishop g5 makes perfect sense. And this will be one of those moments where you can try to retreat with the bishop on g3. And the point is, if he does it, there's the cost. Yeah, so he has weakened his kingside pawn structure, and there's some weaknesses. So that will be like pretty much okay to you, even though I think typically after knight h5, the move is bishop e5. And then there are moments when you don't really mind him to kill your bishop with the other knight because he loses a couple of tempi. So that's why I'm saying this is going to be a subject I will be addressing in this bootcamp a couple of times. But as long as you understand the principle that do not give up your bishop for the knight just like that, just like a simple trade, you are making the right choices. So we are going to start with the move queen b6. Black immediately hits the pawn on b2, and you are slightly not in time, because if you want to play something like queen c1, it doesn't feel right to me. I think that black will be able to play stuff like bishop f5, c3, e6, probably h6, knight c6. You have nothing here. I mean, you can play like this, but your queen on c1 is so poorly placed. So that's why also queen b6 is a very popular choice at the competitive chess. And here you have to change your strategy. So I'm proposing you to play c4, which feels like a gambit, but actually the rising positions are very good to you. I also looked at the move knight e2. I tried to transpose, but I thought, if he takes on d4, we take with e-pawn, and maybe we transpose to some of the positions. But I ended up with the thought process is that this is not the better version for you after you'll be studying these lines, because black is not committing to knight c6, which in some lines is here not necessary. Anyway, so my idea is to play c4. We want to play knight c3. We want to fight for the center, and we don't mind give up the pawn. And this, again, is quite important to you, because if you have fears to sacrifice a pawn. I strongly recommend you to get rid of them, of these fears, as quickly as possible. Because modern chess, the best chess, is driven by dynamics, by healthy development. Chess is not a game of material balance. So I know this is a psychological thing for many players. And if you are not secure about this, I would advise you to watch my bootcamp, whichever episode it was, Positional Sacrifice, where I talk about this. And I explain the concept why very often giving up a pawn just for a couple of tempi is a good thing. So don't worry about the pawn on b2 as long as you get massive lead in development. Yeah. So let's say black accepts it. Actually, this already is a pretty dangerous move for black. So we play knight e2. Let's say black goes here, takes it, rook b1. Accepting the second pawn is just suicide because of bishop c4. Here, bishop b5. And black is simply experiencing problems. So you want to cast a short, you want to play knight e5, he's stuck in the center. Okay, he has a pawn. Maybe the fork looks very tempting, but you play rook b3. And suddenly, again, his position is very shaky, and look at that. Just like that, his knight on d1 is in trouble. So the question is it worth a pawn for black? Or another way he could play here is to play e6, try to complete development. Again, we play c takes on d5. And there are some lines where you can try to even to trap the queen. You take on b8, you play rook b1, bishop b5. Is a very unpleasant threat, so he really needs to be super, super careful. Yeah, what does he do? Let's say he takes it. Now that bishop c4 is not immediately killing, you give a check. Bishop d7 means that the king for black is going to walk in the center. You're going to cast a short and have a terrific attack. Again, it just feels very, very dangerous, so I think black has to walk away. And it just goes to something like this, one sample line really, where the question is black happy about this? So he tries to close the position, but you have a massive attack. And ask advice to Stockfish. Stockfish says that white is much better in this position down 2 pawns. So I suppose this already means black is lost. Basically, black is up 2 pawns. And white is the one who is much better. So this means black is borderline lost already here. So, yeah, for black, accepting this pawn is dangerous. Like, I show a couple of lines. This bishop e5 is a very common maneuver in the system. You want to play rook a1, trap the queen. And let's say black walks away. You start to apply pressure. There's a pin. He's somehow holding on here, but yeah, you can at least take on b7. You can destroy his kingside pawn structure. Bishop takes on f6. So black is in a bad shape. And that's why at a good level, nobody takes the pawn on b2. At least here. Yeah, so people understand that it's very dangerous. And instead, if he takes on d4 with a pawn, you take with a queen, and you just secure yourself a nice, easy game. Let's say he takes on d4, you take with the knight. And we have some sort of a symmetrical position where your Dutch bishop is out. Very often white is quite happy even with a position where the bishop is on c1. But here you see your bishop stands on a 4. So you are just having more pieces developed and they're standing more active. And if black delays it, yeah, maybe you can take it and play knight e2 again with an easy game. But I really like this move, knight c3. This is why you play c4 in the first place. And here, the only difference is that knight x on d4 is not going to work because of e5. So that's why for black it makes sense to delay the queen trade, but now we can play in an IQP. And again, like this is the position where you are the one who is asking some questions. I do hope that you don't have any assumptions that having an isolated pawn is a bad thing. It all comes down to the piece activity. Yeah, and here engine slightly favors your position. Black is losing a lot of tempi, and I think this is the easiest setup you can do. Okay, black has an outpost on d5, congratulations, but you don't have to take it. You play aggressively at the queen side. Black will have problems with the king's safety. And if he goes with the other knight on d5, yeah, bishop g5, rook c1. If he takes on c3, you take with the pawn. You take over the center. And this is like one of the sample lines I found. Yeah, knight of 6 is knight b5 with some problems. you're penetrating his 7th rank, or takes, knight of 3. Again, black is slightly worse. So ultimately, this is not ideal for black. I mean, he can probably do this, but I think he has to play something like e6. Now you play knight c3. And again, here, black can try to take on b2, but you already know your response. You play knight b5. You're threatening to play rook b1. You're threatening to play knight c7 fork. And let's say he stops the fork, but now you're about to castle short. You have a massive lead in development. His queen on b2 is weird. So maybe my advice to you would be if you are in this situation, perhaps do not focus too much on trapping the queen, but focus on developing your initiative. And again, remember, a pawn for initiative is a very small price to pay. Yeah, so let's say check, 92, 94. I think that's the most human line. Black forces the queens off the board. You're like, okay, fine. But look at this position. Yeah, so black has problems with development. You want to open up the queen side. There's even a spectacular pawn sacrifice with bishop f3. And black is just suffering. I don't see any easy way for black to complete development. So he has at the moment 2 extra pawns, but the question is, at what cost? And if he doesn't take on b2, maybe he can try to play something like c takes on d4. Again, we take with a queen. And play like queen b2, rook b1 again, yeah? Maybe this. We just complete development. And again, here you take with the knight. He can try to ruin your pawn structure. But again, you are slightly better because of the bishop pair and having a better development. So I think this part is pretty clear. That the queen b6 is kind of a scary move, but it doesn't accomplish anything. I think black plays queen b6 to get out of you queen c1. That's what he does it, really. And then c4 is like, oh, he didn't really want to see that. Or maybe there's the other side. You're playing this at the club level, and you're playing against opponents who really love pawns. Well, it's going to give you a massive lead in development. By the way, I forgot to mention this at the very beginning, is that I have created the PGN for the London system, as well as for my past episodes I've done. And the PGN will be available for a separate purchase. So you don't have to get it. I will explain all the ideas you have to know. But if you feel like you want to study it a bit more seriously, and you want to look at the PGN and switch on an engine and maybe use this as a basis for your own database, you're already at that level, yeah, you can go ahead and get it. Yeah, but PGN is purely optional. And at the moment, it's available only on my Patreon page. All right, so let's say black doesn't play queen b6 right now, but obviously queen b6 is a big idea of this part. Let's say he includes c takes on d4. C takes on d4, e takes on d4, and now he plays queen b6, because now c4 is already not ideal to you. Because you see, we have not taken on d4 with the knight, as I show you in those previous positions. So here we're going to play knight e2. The thing is, again, for black, it's quite dangerous to accept the pawn. Let's say he does it, we play rook b1. Yeah, now what? I mean, queen a2, you're just going to go for fast development. And I think for black, the most human move is to play something like queen c3. Push back the queen a bit, give a check, maybe walk away, but there's already a couple of good moves. Short castle, knight e5, c4, the initiative basically develops itself. So that's why I didn't even look seriously at queen takes on a2, because it feels it's just not worth it, really, for black. Yeah, like, let's say here, without any deep analysis, I think I could go like here, maybe use the same idea, bishop d3. Now this pawn is stuck here, should castle, e6, knight e5, here, c4, and your game just goes on, and the queen on a2 is in trouble. Yeah, so maybe along the way you're going to find a way to trap it, but yeah, I think it's, again, a very small price for you to pay for such a fantastic position. So basically, for him, taking on b2 is very risky, and he would have to play knight c6. And now we play knight b3. We protect the pawn on d4, and this is a pretty good setup. Our idea is to play a4, a5, push back the queen, secure the center with c3, and then think going for some sort of a kingside attack. Yeah, so let's say he goes here, a4. How does he stop a5? It's not clear because a5 weakens the b5 square. So I suppose he wants to stop at least your a-pawn's march, because if you're going to be allowed, you can play a5, a6, completely demolish his integrity of the queen side. So here, push back the queen. And probably there's really more than one way to play this, because you have accomplished something at the queen side. But the engine likes this move, knight e5, with an idea that there are going to be moments when you can recapture the pawn. So c3. Yeah, by the way, sorry, I forgot to mention. Knight e5 comes with a g4, h4, h5 idea. So let's say the opponent plays bishop e7. We play g4 and h4, which is a pretty common idea in the Scandinavian defense, sometimes in the Slav. We want to play h5, we want to trap the bishop, and basically if he plays something like h6 or h5, this is just bad news. Yeah, so black is having left with multiple weaknesses in his position. It's just very bad for black. So he cannot do that. So that's why he has to take on e5, pretty much, because of this threat. And now we take with a pawn. We try to do the same idea. The threat is to play g4, h5, trap the bishop. Let's say he stops this. And now you have some sort of a kingside attack. Maybe it's not a big deal. Like, this was one of the angel lines. I checked. Queen f3, knight e4, try to stir up things at the king side. Queen g3. If he castles short, he's going to have problems. There's knight e6 threat. The bishop on g6 is a target. So it goes to something like this, where I think that in the long run, for black, he has more practical problems with a king safety. Naturally, I mean, this is some bigger theory than this, but I think it's going to give you like a pretty good introduction where this line takes you. Let's go back. And the other move I checked here is, wait, not knight h5 here. I think knight h5 is going to be covered a bit different in a different version. Yeah, I think it's knight c6. Yeah, so knight c6. And now we play knight e2. And again, I think here the move order is quite important. That's what I'm saying, is that you cannot blindly play c3, knight e2, bishop d3, knight e5, whatever, and go for the kingside attack. It doesn't work like that. So you have to pay attention to the opponent's move orders. And the correct move is knight e2. Because if you play c3, after queen b6, how do you defend the pawn? Right? After queen b6, suddenly queen c1 is just poorly placed queen. And if you go here, you have to know the sequence. Black plays c4. You don't want to take on b6 because this position, black already is just better with b5, b4. Your rook and a1 is pinned. Or bishop f5, e6, or maybe the same idea, knight e7, knight b6, knight f4. It's just very unpleasant. Why would you go here? That's actually the position we'll be aiming ourselves several times in this bootcamp. So if you walk away and you're saying that there's going to be b3, black has bishop f5. Very common idea. You could have taken f5, queen b2, queen n1, your queen side is falling apart. And you could have trapped the queen. Trust me, there's no way to trap the queen because of the black pawn on c4. So you go here, and let's say black now plays knight h5, and you're just worse. Black has the bishop there, black has the space, your queen on c1 is weird. So why are we doing this? So that's why you cannot blindly play c3. And instead, you have to play knight e2. And again, black can play c takes, queen b6, knight b3, and this transposes to the line we discussed. It's definitely a bigger theory than that, but it starts with this. And here the big question is, yes, what happens after queen b6? Now, this is a pretty big theory. And I think that at the competitive level, all the pros, they're going very often right here So I'm going to show you the directions where the current theory stands. I might not be aware of some latest developments because I'm not a London guy. I studied the London system for several days, non-stop. Yeah, I was checking the databases, I was checking how Gatokomsky plays, I was checking chess pace, what's hot, what's not hot. So I'm still kind of new to this, but I think I have a pretty good idea what is going on in the London, at least at the professional level. So our approach is d-Neiksans on c5. You're going to play knight b3, right? Knight b3 is not going to transpose, it's just going to be bad. Black plays c4 and your queen set falls apart. You cannot do that. So we play d-Neiksans on c5. And the principal choice for black is to take on b2. Because if he takes on c5, you just have a very easy game. Like these symmetrical positions, they're really fantastic to you because the bishop is out on f4. Let's say here, the queen on c5 for black is misplaced, and let's say he ruins your pawn structure, whatever. But you just have a very easy game. b5 is b4. It doesn't work. He's not trapping your knight on c4. And it just goes to like this, where you have some space advantage, easy game, and black is kind of solid, but at the same time, your bishop power is pretty serious. So queen c5, according to an engine, is already pretty serious inaccuracy. And that's why all the good players, they play queen b2, we play rook b1. And I think that here you could win some games even without a big fight, especially if the opponent doesn't know any opening theory. Because let's say he plays queen a2. This already is borderline lost. So you play bishop b5, you pin the knight on c6, black, let's say he runs away with the queen, he has to run away at some point. We castles, a6, the pin is annoying, he wants to get rid of it, we open up the position, c4, e6, 95. How is black surviving this? Yeah, so he's like good to tempi behind in development. The king is still stuck in the center. Again, remember, all of this is for just one pawn. Very, very dangerous stuff for black. So I did not even analyze this any further. Or let's say he plays bishop d7, show castle, e6, again c4, open the position as much as you can. And let's say black is up now 2 pawns. But his queen is in trouble. Knight b3, hit the bishop. Here, queen b2, and now the simplest choice for you is to take, bishop b5, you're trapping the queen, because this simply costs black already quite a lot. Yeah, so you see he either drops the bishop or the queen or whatever. Yeah, so everything is falling apart. So the bottom line is queen a2 is just a mistake. And here black has pretty much a choice between queen c3, which is right now the super trendy move, or queen a3, which I believe is popularized by Alexei Serrano, former Russian player. I think now he plays for Serbia. And after queen a3, there's a bit different ideas, but we still play bishop b5. And here black, commonly in these positions, he has to make a choice. Does he want to complete the development with d6 or g6? Anything else is just much worse. Yeah, so taking the pawn on c5 is bad. He cannot do that. He has to run away from the center as quickly as possible. So let's say he plays it with g6 here. Now you're forcing his hand. So he cannot play... I didn't actually check this, like bishop d7. I feel it's going to drop something. Maybe technically it's possible, but it feels very dangerous. So actually here black has to take on c5. c4, open up the position, queen a4. And yeah, black is somehow surviving this, but again, it feels so scary. Knight c6, bishop c6, and it feels like black already is losing something. This is where Engine says that he's somehow okay with this. Yeah, and even in this line, you end up pushing slightly because of your pieces are a bit more active, even though Engine says everything is a draw. But I think that this line is quite promising, and maybe with accurate play, black survives this, or he's ready to risk with bishop d7. But I think you just use the same ideas with c4 and explode the center. And like here, something like c4, yeah, like this. I didn't check this. Let's say bishop g7 and take on d7. So does he take with a king? I don't think so. Yeah, so c takes on d5, the position opens up. It's just very dangerous. So the other move that black can do is to play e6. And now we play the same stuff. C4, takes. Yeah, the common idea for you is to play bishop e5 at some point. I did not check knight takes on d5. I maybe should have checked it. Let me check very quickly. What was after knight takes on d5? There was something bad. Knight takes on d5. Yeah, of course, bishop e5. That's the common idea. Knight c3 is he's just losing something. Rook b3. Queen f6, queen c1. Yeah, just like that. So what do you think? Of course, what do you expect? Black is so badly developed that there's going to be something. Rook c3, bishop e4, let's say rook c6, queen c6, goodbye. Everything falls apart. Yeah, so black can do that. Again, it's just for one pawn. And if he does something else, like shoot castle, knight c4, his queen already is in trouble. And I was actually saving the queen. Queen a2 is rook a1. He traps the queen. He cannot do that. And knight c3, again, it just leads to positions where his knight most likely is going to be stuck. Yeah, bishop c6, very precise. Exactly, yeah. So I didn't check this line with an engine. Now I did. I switched on the engine. But quite a common theme in these positions is that knight c3, knight e1, the knight on d1 for black is going to be simply stuck. So that's why after c takes on d5, he has to take with e-pawn. We play queen c2, apply some pressure here. And I think for black, practically this position is very difficult to play. Let's say rook b3, some knight b4, some cheap tricks, queen c5, knight e3, discovered attack, the queen on c5 is hit. But it ends up with black going for this, whatever it is this. Yeah, so you have to apologize. I have to apologize to you that I didn't show this in, I didn't analyze this in a greater depth. I just find it to be very inhuman, and you're already the one who's up a piece. There's more than one good line in this setup. So probably after queen a3, g6 is the best setup. Now let's go look at the queen c3, which is the most popular choice. Of course, we play bishop b5, and here black is making a choice between e6 and g6. If he plays, by the way, if he plays queen c5, like I already said, very often this is just a mistake. Castle e6, c4, we have a massive lead in development. Knight b3, knight e4. I suppose he has to defend it. Knight e5 takes. How is he completing development? It's not very clear to me. Like short castle, bishop f6, he's dropping a piece. Bishop b5 is knight b5. He's dropping something, yeah. So, and also the queen is in the harm's way all the time. So that's why you see, for black, accepting the pawn is very dangerous, and he has to choose between e6 and g6. So e6 is, I think g6 is more popular these days. And after e6, we cast a short. Again, he cannot really take the pawn. Let's say he takes it. We play bishop e5. Remember this maneuver. We ruin his castling opportunities and open up the position. Again, all of this is for just one pawn. Yeah, knight e2, queen h5 something. The king is always in trouble. And I think, again, for a pawn, this is a very, very small price to get this fantastic initiative. So if he plays bishop e7, we play e4. Yeah, this e4, by the way, this was quite a big thing, I remember. Even when I was out practicing the London system, this was quite a big thing some years ago. Sensational idea. But yeah, these are essentially the wonders of the engine. And the funny part is black cannot take the pawn to d4 in either way. Because if he takes with the d-pawn, we suddenly trap the queen. That's the big idea. Bishop d2. I'm sorry, not bishop d2. I think it was rook b3. Pardon me. This was the idea. Yeah, rook b3. Because bishop d2 would allow him to escape on d4. Now he cannot do it because I just take on d4 and that's a pin. Right? So he cannot do that. If he takes with a knight, we take with a knight. And this, by the way, sequence is not obvious to black at all if he doesn't know this. It's so easy to miss it. So we take on c6. And we play here. Bishop d6. He cannot take on d6. We want to play knight e5. His king is stuck in the center. And let's say he accepts the piece. I mean, this is such a lovely line. Takes, check, and here. And just like that, you develop a killing attack, and the best the black can do is give up the queen. It's a fascinating line, and I think even a very good player might easily fall into this if he doesn't know this, because it's so difficult to see from afar bishop d6. So difficult. Yeah, looking at the knight, you're looking intermezzo moves, but bishop d6 is just not what you're looking at. So the idea of e4 is you want to play e5. You want to establish support on e5 and go for some kingside attack. And you know, I was thinking about this. Maybe I should make a separate bootcamp about the kings in and attack pawn structures. This was essentially one of my main topics I did for Charlotte Chess Center, end of December. So I don't want to reuse the material, but maybe I'm going to present it in some way at some point and explain why this pawn structure at the competitive chess is very, very good for white. So let's say black castles. I think he has to play e5 here, and then we just play chess. So we want to trap the queen. This line is still quite forcing. Black has to be careful, attack the bishop. We play knight e4, and we just sacrifice a pawn. He gets the pawn, queen takes on c5, and don't you worry about getting it back with bishop d7, rook takes on b7, because if you play a gambit with the sole purpose to win back the pawn in next 3 moves, you shouldn't play the gambit. That's how it works. You play the gambit to get initiative. You got it. So let's play for the initiative. Yeah, so we play rook e1. We have a fantastic attacking chances at the king side. Bishop d3, some knight b3, because yeah, he cannot take on d4. There's a discovered check, obviously. So he now is threatening to do it. Here, queen g4, h4, h5, maybe queen g3. Okay, you're down a pawn. But this position is quite dangerous. And for example, Stockfish says that white is better here. Yeah, that's all you need to know. And then f6 or f5, you take on f6 at some point and open up the king side. Again, this pawn is a very small price for you to pay for such a great initiative. And I think that this line is the reason why e6 is no longer popular these days. Maybe some big expert is going to step in and say I'm wrong, and I've not been around for so long to know these nuances, but I think that e6 is fading away a bit, and g6 is now more popular. And we still play e4. And here black can take with a pawn. We have this bishop e5 idea. And for example, the obvious move, queen c5, is a mistake. We take it. We take it. And again, it just leads to something like this, where black has massive problems with development. Yeah, I don't know, how is he planning to survive this? Like this, and it's just going to end badly for black. Yeah, so he's 2 tempi behind in development. So he cannot take the pawn, and he has to go here. And this is where Engine gives some crazy stuff like show castle. And I was looking at these lines like at the pretty good depth. The threat is to play knight e4. Now that the king is gone from the pin, he accepts it. You play bishop c6 and queen f3. And I think that this line already is really good for accelerated type control games, because you have initiative and you're down a piece. But for black, it's very, very difficult to find a move here. Because let's say he plays queen d8, which is quite a human move. You want to protect the king, bishop g7 and show castle. The point is queen c6 is going to be bishop d7. That's the big idea. The rook at a8 is protected. But now you go here, and here, and here, and here. And already a couple of moves later, you have successfully won back the sacrifice material. And somehow Engine here finds a way for black to survive this a3 funny stuff. And it just ends with this position. You play for pure domination, and if black plays for the obvious move, rook d8, you simply get maybe close to winning queen endgame. Queen b7, c6, c7. As long as you don't blunder some perpetual check, yeah? So some work is still necessary. So queen d8 is a very dangerous move for black. And I think that the best he can do is knight e5, but it hangs a whole rook on h8. So, yeah, you take it. That's the best. Actually, I forgot to check what happens. I should check it right now, actually. I forgot to check. What happens if you defend the knight first? It's a very logical question. If you would go here, queen b4, bishop takes on h8, f6. So engine favors this for black. You just want a full rook. You're up in exchange, but the point is your bishop on h8 is going to be in trouble. Okay, so this is Stockfish, basically. Yeah, so for humans, it's very difficult to understand this, and according to Stockfish, it's best to take it. Because now your knight on d2 is a bit more flexible. And I think he has to accept it. You play c4. You're trying to get to the pawn on c6, and this leads to some mess. Like this, top choice of engine, this entire line. This, here, and finally it's somehow balanced. Yeah, so I did not analyze this very thoroughly, and probably it would make sense if you're like super serious about this. You would get a course, a proper course, right? Who analyze this position with the cloud engines, whatever, and they tell you what's the definite answer here. But I don't think there's like forced win or anything, because this is one of the top choices for black, the opening theory. So probably it's not a big secret if both of the players play the correct moves. It's somehow equal. But this line is quite challenging, and I think this is the direction where the modern theory is taking right now. This entire sequence with queen b6. I know it's very challenging, but now that after watching this, I hope you understand why you do not have anything simpler than this. Because it's either this or you simply accept that after the opening you're going to have nothing. So that's why it does make sense to try to find for something. Yeah. Okay, let me see if I missed anything. I don't think I... wait, yeah, I forgot. There was this line. After e4, I showed you only d takes on e4, but he could play a6, one of the top choices. And now there's a move, bishop c6, bishop e3 against some engine stuff. Whatever, yeah? It's kind of similar. So you can check the file in the PGN if you're interested. This is a game between Andrew Tang and Benjamin Bok a couple of years ago. I'm pretty sure these guys were totally in the prep, and it just ended with a draw, whatever. You can replay with slow motion. I don't know. It makes no sense from strategical point of view, but it's just pure computer chess. I think bishop e5 is a bit easier to understand. And now the point is you attack the queen, you win some tempi, take on c6, and you go here. At least we don't have any crazy chess, and you are the one who is trying to attack the black queen. He has to run away, and you still try to trap it. So black has to like make a lot of difficult moves to get here. So again, I'm just going to replay this very, very quickly because I don't think it really makes sense for me to explain every single move, why it's that and why it's not this. This is basically engine line. But the bottom line is black is okay if he's able to find a lot of difficult moves. So this already is basically a win for you in accurate time control games. In classical chess, if black is really well prepared, that he knows all of this stuff, okay, maybe he's going to figure it out. But even, let's say, this final sequence where you're down a pawn, but you have really nicely well-positioned pieces, the black king's a bit exposed. I think, again, from practical standpoint, it just looks pretty good. For pretty good chances for white. All right. All right, let's go forward. Let's talk about the positions when black plays the queen's gambit declined without queen b6. So again, we start with knight f3. I do think it's a bit more accurate move order. We play bishop f4. And here's this moment. There's a couple of things. So black can play c5 immediately. But black could also play e6. e6, e3, and bishop d6. Now, this is a very tricky move order, so I would advise you to pay attention. If you have studied the London system a bit, you might know that when your bishop is attacked on the 4, I probably should retreat to g3. Not quite. Because after bishop g3, if you do this at the wrong moment, you might have problems to stop black's e5 push. So black plays c5, he plays queen c7, and knight d7. And I think one of the first, maybe I'm mistaken, but one of the first GMs who advocated this was Pavel Ulyanov. I had his modern chess course back in the day. Now the point is e5 is unstoppable. So with the knight on c6, sometimes you would have access to bishop b5. But here, no. And also, by the way, one more thing. With the knight on c6, you can take on c5, and the queen on c7 is pinned. So that's why knight e7 is just more slick way for black to push e5. Let's say you carry out the same idea, but if black is able to get this, you might even get a worse position. So you should know this is black's dream setup. You take on e5 a couple of times, black is perfectly fine, and you're going to be the one who will be fighting for equality. So that's why let's pay attention. And I really like the move 92. By the way, when I was working on the bootcamp, I had to use some reference points. Somebody who would explain me at least in which direction to look at. So I looked at Abhijit Gupta's modern chess course. Some of the directions I liked. Some of the directions I disagreed with. So I used it as a reference point, meaning from one's perspective, what are the moves I should focus on? What are the moves I should not focus on? And then I would make my own way. But the point is here, after bishop d6, for example, Gupta recommends knight e5, which is quite an interesting setup with knight e2, bishop d3, knight f3, sometimes provoke stuff with knight g5, but I quite did not like it, at least, to do it immediately. And I like the move knight e2 a bit better. Because the point is, after knight e2, we are happy to take on f4 with the pawn. And let's say black will go takes. If he wants to play c5, typically we want to take on c5 and establish ourselves the control of these squares. So bishop d3, g3, c3, knight b3, knight e4 feels like a very nice blockade where black has a slightly worse light square bishop. So let's say black goes here. And now there's a chance to go for some Kingston attack with, again, this h4 and h5. So h6 is kind of a threat, knight e5, and g4. So that would be my direction. Like g5, queen g4, long castle, again, develop some sort of initiative. And I kind of like it a bit more. But probably black is like still fine. Maybe he doesn't have to, castle short. Maybe he can delay it. Maybe he can play c5 immediately. But then I think you don't want to get a position where your c-pawn is here. You want to take with the knight. So that's already pretty sophisticated approach. And I think that c5 is still the main. We play e3. And normally I think that players from black, they're not going to focus on these nuances. They're not going to focus. Is it knight c6, e6, bishop d6, or is it e6, bishop d6, and then knight e6? For them, it's going to be exactly the same. But there are some differences. So let's say black plays e6, which is one of the best setups. So we play c3. The point is now, if black plays queen b6, we play queen b3. We stop the advancement. As you can see, black does not have the bishop on f5, and after c4, we can go here. You see, he is committed to e6. We can actually do this. And we can continue with knight e2, b3, either rip apart the queen side or push e4. This is a really great position. If he plays knight c6 here, the thing about this move is that it gives you more opportunities, because as soon as black commits to knight c6, you have access to some bishop b5 ideas. I'm going to explain what does it mean. So let's say here the nuance is we have to play knight e2. Pretty accurate, because after bishop d3, again, if you mix up the move order, you should remember black's threats. So knight h5 is always a threat. Again, you know that you are not supposed to give up the bishop for the knight without any fight. So let's say you try to keep it, and there's queen b6. And you know that you don't want to put the queen on c1 because the queen is misplaced. And after queen b6, there's c4 again. So that's why early bishop d3 here in this version is not going to be accurate. And I get it. You can mix up the move orders. But one thing that has always helped me to navigate between the lines is understanding what does the opponent want. And if you understand what he wants, then it's easier to make the right choice. So that's why we are going to play knight e2. And now, for example, black has a couple of choices. So queen b6 we looked at already before. By the way, here queen b6 is just rook b1. Yeah, so I don't think black accomplishes anything. Let's say black plays c takes, e takes, and there's quite a popular theme for black to play knight h5 here. So we retreat with the bishop. We attack the knight on h5. And you would just again play this symmetrical Caro position. That's why I'm saying that studying the Caro exchange Caro and bootcamp number 10 is going to be quite important for you, because I analyze this in greater depth, all the setups. Yeah, so this is one of the sample lines. You normally complete development, rook e1, knight e5 at some point, engine favors you, because it's easier for you to play at the king side. Again, the pawn chain directs you that you should be playing at the king side. That's what we are going to do. Stuff like this. There's some kings in and attack vibes, perhaps. It's amazing in how many openings I find kings in and attack vibes, really. So let's say black plays not c takes on d4 and e takes on d4, and he plays knight h5 immediately. Let's say he does this. Now we play bishop g5. Again, we don't give up the bishop for the knight for no good reason. Black could trade it for the bishop, but then again, what is the knight doing on h5? It's not very clear, so I think he should try at least to get the bishop pair. But now it's costing him something. So that's what I'm telling you. If you can force out of your opponent's weaknesses, then you're okay, fine. Trade it. Trade the bishop. So bishop e2 is the simplest move. Takes. Yeah, here, by the way. Typically, we do want to play e takes on d4 for a king set attack. But there will be moments when you are very much open-minded to take with the c-pawn as well, especially here, because black has committed to some kingside weaknesses, and specifically here, e takes on d4 runs under knight f4. And he kills your last bishop. So we're going to take with a c-pawn. Bishop g3, let's say he kills your bishop. Fine. Takes. We just have an easy game, which feels like some symmetrical Slav setup where black has made a lot of silly moves to the king side. I don't know what is this. So what's he doing there? There's no e5. I mean, his center is pretty weak. And Engine just carries out these common ideas. e4 is a threat. Try to expose the black king a bit, or knight a4, knight c5, a3, b4, or maybe queen b3. Very easy game. White is just better here. Maybe reroute the knight to d3. The knight on d3 in the Cosmos structures, as they say, stands really well. And then black tries to be ambitious and tries to murder your bishop with h5. Now bishop d3 and h4 is simply not working. Yeah, you're just going to take on f5. And I looked at this line a bit, like king f7, black is making a face. There's going to be some kings that attack. You just take and play here. And black's g5 already makes no sense because you just shut the door completely with h4. That's it. Yeah, so black is just much worse here. So he cannot really do this. So knight h5 is, again, something you have to expect, but it's not that dangerous. And I think I already showed you this line. that after bishop e7, now black wants to play knight h5. But yeah, by the way, think about this bishop e7. I should mention you. One of the big themes in this position is that after bishop d6, black wants to take on f4, he wants to take on d4, and establish you a worse pawn structure. Meaning, you don't mind him to take at f4, you recapture the e pawn, but you want to keep the d4 square as an outpost for your knight. And our idea will be to play bishop g3. That's why we do this. Because again, if you take on d6 yourself, if you do this, black's going to take with a queen and he's going to push e5. You know this, that you cannot allow this to happen, right? So you have to react to this in some way. So bishop g3 is the move. So that's why pay attention to this move, bishop e7. So black is threatened to play knight h5. And if you automatically will respond with h3 to meet knight h5 with bishop h2, black's going to do this. And you don't have access to bishop g3. Do you see the difference? Some people play like this. They're really smart, which is still okay to you. Like you can take on c5 and play bishop d3 with some e4 ideas, but I think the black is ultimately fine here. Like you want to play like queen e2, e4, maybe e5 again, some kings in an attack pawn structure, but black is supposed to be okay. So I think the simpler move for you is to stop this immediately and just play knight e5. Knight e5, you stop knight h5. If black takes it, you know what to do. Take with a pawn, play h4, he gonna take on h4, rook b1, knight f3, some kings in attack. Actually, this line ends up with funny stuff like rook g1. Rook g1, g4, g5, really like this. The king is feeling very secure in the center. Engine really likes your position here. So there's a lot of dynamics. And let's say black plays a shook castle, you play bishop d3, you already know, you know this stuff, yeah. Knight takes, d takes, queen h5, create a weakness, knight f3, h4, h5. It feels very dangerous for black. And if he plays something like, let's say here, there was this line, yeah. Bishop d6, he tries to smoke out the knight. And then push e5. We stop him here. And here we are already threatening to take on c5 with a pawn for free. So he has to take with a queen. And you go h4. Again, he wants to play e5. We stop him. We play bishop e5. The threat is to take with f6. So he already needs to be a bit careful here. This feels quite dangerous to him. Rook g3 is incoming. Some kings at attack. I forgot to check, let me check very quickly. What happens if he plays knight e7? Feels like there's going to be some tactics. Knight e7, queen h5, g6, just queen g5. And again, h5 is incoming, yeah? So, so I suppose this makes sense. He cannot fully smoke out your bishop. And if he plays like knight e7, yeah, you play h4. Takes, takes. Queen h5 is incoming to provoke a weakness. So I suppose he has to play something like f6 or 5. And we open up. We provoke a weakness. I walk back. I think, again, this principle is very clear, right? By now, queen h5, g6, walk back. And maybe black is hoping to survive this somehow. But, yeah, push the line a bit further. Now you castle alongside, you play g4, queen g2, f4, g5, whatever. So according to an engine, white still has the better chances here, even though he probably can trade both rooks at each file. Let's go back a bit. So yeah, that's why this bishop e7, you have to be a bit careful with this knight h5 threat. And h3 is not an automatic move. So yeah, you stop it with knight e5. But let's say black plays bishop d6. He's threatening to take on f4. Let's say you mix up. Let's say you mix up and you play something like bishop e2. So he's going to take it, and queen b6. I don't think this is a good position to you at all. Even though his bishop on c8 is slightly worse, you have some practical problems to defend the pawn on d4. And knight b3 is going to be a5, and your position already is going in the wrong direction, right? So that's why after bishop d6, we have to play bishop g3. And if he takes on g3, we take with h-pawn. If he takes on d4, we take with the e-pawn. Yeah, c takes on d4 is e takes on d4. So he might go back with the original idea to push e5. That's the big idea. And here you have two very interesting ideas. So the idea number one is, of course, you play knight e5. You block it. And after knight e5, takes with e5, knight e7, you play f4. He tries to demolish your center. You play bishop b5. And this is where I love this idea of the engine. Make a positional pawn sacrifice. Play knight f3. Pretty cool idea. Like takes, so you just dominate this pawn on e5, bishop d3, long castle. And it's a great gambit. Yeah, the black king is again in trouble. And there's no time for e5. I think after e5 there's some bishop g6 check. I didn't check this. Instead of this, instead of knight e5, you can also play bishop e5. And this is quite an important concept because you stop e5, but this idea is going to appear in the London more than once. You kill the knight, and you play queen c2. The point is, you want to play some knight e5, maybe some g4, g5, attack the pawn on h7. And if he takes it, you don't take with the e-pawn anymore. You take with his c-pawn. Because now you see you open up the c-file, there's a weakness on c5, a weak pawn on c6, and you suddenly switch from a king set attack to a nice positional game. So I'm talking about some long castle. Maybe actually here short castle is fine, but the point is put the knight on c5 and just dominate with a good knight against the bad bishop. Pretty cool, right? So instead of this, after bishop d6, we are going to go here. And let's say he castles. We have a choice. So we have a choice to play bishop d3. Short castle. Again, you have to watch out for the e5 push. So he could go like this, queen d6 and push e5. You have to react to this in some way. And you can still take on c5 and push e4 for a fun game. It's still okay. But there's also this move, bishop e5. So not only you're stopping e5, there's an idea that you're going to take on c6 and play queen a4. Very, very famous idea of the London. You want to get to the c5 weakness. If he takes on d4, you take on d6, and you play c takes on d4. And c5 does not work because of queen a3. And you're pinning the pawn on c5. Very, very important idea. So if he goes here, we suddenly start to play positional. Here. That's it, black is worse. So just play positional at the queen side, fix the pawn on b2, double the rooks, put the knight on c5, and black has a very good chance to wind up in a position where his last bishop is just useless. And finally here, after c3, so we talked about knight c6. Black could try to play bishop d6 because, again, I think it's quite smart for him not to put the knight on c6 just yet. So, again, there's some nuances. If you think the move order doesn't matter, you have to pay attention to. Because if you start with knight e2, you want to trick the move order, your opponent with the move orders, and keep your bishop in f1 to be flexible. The point is, now black's going to take it. You know he wants to take it at 4, and you don't want to have the pawn on d4. We talked about this. You don't want to get this position. We talked about this. So you think you're going to take on d6, but he now takes on c3. And you can play a gambit, but black plays knight e7, and I think he's just fine. So that's why, instead of this, I think you have to do something else. So what other options do you really have? I was looking at the bishop takes on d6, queen d6, and knight e5 to stop black's idea to play knight c6 and push e5. And it is quite a common idea for the London, but I'm afraid here it's not going to work. Why? Because let's say you play knight e2, your idea is to play f4, bishop d3, and set up some kind of a stonewall setup. Black can play knight e7, and he's smoking your knight out with f6. So it's simply too direct, and it's not working. Now, we have two choices, and The original choice that I like the most is the move bishop d3. But there's also the move bishop b5 check. Very, very tricky move. Because for black, he cannot cover with the bishop. The bishop on d6 is left defenseless. So it's got to be knight c6. And it makes sense to look in this direction. You take on c6 and you play queen a4. You target the pawn on c6 and you want to get to the pawn on c5. So if black doesn't know this line, there's a very good chance he's going to get in a worse position. Let's say he defends the pawn. You take on d6. You play knight e2. You already know the stuff. c takes, c5 is queen a3. Yeah. So, oh wait, there's no c5 even. Yeah. So what I'm talking about, you just simply you're going to block the c5 square with knight b3 and knight c5. And after short castle, queen a3, knight b3, you're just winning something. Yeah, it's pretty great. But the problem is that after queen a4, black can play short castle, which he might not know, because it feels it's very scary because there's queen c6. Yeah, there's an attack, and what if? But actually, queen c6 is a mistake. You cannot do this because black's going to take it. You cannot take the rook because of queen c7, and your queen is trapped. And after e takes e4, black plays rook b8 and has a fantastic gambit. So you can play on your opponent's fears on this. So he would have to either know this or gather the courage to play the short castle. And if you take on d6, you play queen a3, same idea. This leads to pretty big theory. So I don't really know where it currently stands. I think that ultimately black is fine. Let's say you go here, you want to kill the knight, you want to get to the pawn on c5. Black pushes e5. Takes, queen c5, queen g6, and yeah, whatever is this. Yeah, so I think Engine was saying this is the best the white can do. Long castle, d takes on e5, and it's equal. So I think that also at the competitive chess, it's a very well-researched position, so people know the risks they're taking going here. And I think there's definitely some rewards if your opponent doesn't know the line. But ultimately, I think that bishop d3 is a bit simpler. After bishop d3, let's say if black plays bishop f4, we take with the pawn and we want to recapture on d4 with the knight. For example, if black plays something like queen c7, hits the pawn on f4, we defend it, we take with the knight, and the big idea is we walk back. We want to fight for the control of these two squares, e5 and d4. Let's say here, black pushes e5, because if he doesn't, you're going to play rook e1, put the knight on e5, play knight e2, knight f3, maybe knight e4 at some point. You're just having this strong Glasgow bishop compared to black's bishop on c8. You have chances for a Kingston attack, or at least an easier game. And the best for black basically is to accept a position where he's playing an IQP. Yeah, so isolate the pawn. Engine, of course, as usual, says it's about balance, but I think from a practical standpoint, white's position is a bit easier to play. And the black can do this like in several ways. He can try to play queen b6, attack the pawn on b2 and d4. You defend with queen c1. Now queen c1 actually is a pretty good idea because guess what? Queen b3, again, is going to be c4. I think so, at least. I didn't check this. Yeah, I think this. Here, takes. Here, b5, a3, knight c6, and b4 to follow. Makes sense, even though his bishop on c8 is pretty bad. So here, queen c1 is good because we want to take on c5 with a d pawn. And if black forces your hand, he does this. We walk back. And there is a very nice model game that I'm going to include in the PGN. This is the game of Magnus Carlsen against Ding Loren, where Magnus just played the textbook game, how to play against bad Latsko bishop. If I'll have the time in the bootcamp, I'll show you. This probably not, because there's so much stuff I still have to show you. And if black goes here, d4, he tries to stop your blockade of these squares, you just end up with a position where he's still slightly worse. Yeah, like this line, you still keep pressing a bit, but probably with a very accurate play, black is holding on. So instead of this, maybe here, what black could do is black would try to trick you with the move order to play knight e7 and play e5, but now we take on d6 because black has lost the tempo. And now we play knight e5. And now for black, it's not going to be as easy to smoke out the knight because there's no f6, right? Knight e7, f6, there's always queen h5. So let's say he goes here, we play here, and knight e7 is not going to work. Let me check very quickly why it didn't work. It's a knight e7, yeah, queen h5. I don't know how he plays, like g6, queen h6, and f6 is not going to work because of knight g6, and it's just a mate. Queen h7, it's a mate on the board, yeah? So he cannot do that. So the difference is that black cannot smoke out the knight in the same fashion. So this one tempo difference, it really matters. And let's say black goes here, should castle, will play knight d2. Now c takes on d4. You know what to do. You don't want to take with the pawn. He's going to take on f4 and ruin your pawn structure, but we play bishop d6 and his rook is hit. And we take with e-pawn. You already know this. And the best he can do is to push e5, even though I think in some lines you can already stop this. Like you can play queen e2, you stop this, and rook e8, you play knight e5. You play f4, you play should castle, rook f3, rook e1, you go for the easy kingside attack. So black is already in trouble. And if he takes an f4, you take, it's the same position basically. We play g3. Maybe now the difference is he pushes e5, which looks a bit scary. But ultimately, again, you're just fine and you're just in time to rearrange your pieces, and he's left with an IQP. So again, Engine says this is about balance, but I think for you, again, it's an easy game. Here, you put the bishop on g2, that's a weakness in the long run. That's how I treat it. Instead of queen c7, maybe black could try to play here. Wait, I think I show you should castle knight e2. Yeah, I showed you this line. Maybe black could play knight c6 immediately. The point is now that you are committed to bishop d3, now he plays knight c6. That's why I'm telling you the move order really matters here. And again, this is a mistake. You know this, yeah? Takes, and queen b6. We talked about this. You can't do this. But now we play bishop g3. After bishop g3, should castle, we play knight e2. And if black is going to be willing to play e5, he's going to realize that knight on c6 doesn't stand perfectly for this. Let's say one more thing. If he plays b6, he wants to complete development with bishop b7. There is a very surprise weapon. You can play suddenly e4. This e4 sometimes is a thing. Because check this out. Let's say he takes it. You take it. You take it. Suddenly his knight is pinned. You can take it. Queen a4. Your initiative develops very quickly. Here, should castle, rook e1. And maybe with an accurate play, he's going to somehow survive this. But it feels that your pieces are simply standing better. And your opponent has to find still some very accurate moves. But if he goes bishop e7, this is a very important idea. e5, here, he wants to get your bishop. You don't allow him to do that, and knight g5. And knight g5, this gives you some tactical opportunities. For example, I think he cannot take on g3. Yeah, there's going to be simple bishop takes on h7. This is pretty clear. So instead of this, he has to take on g5. Take it, g6, queen e2. We sacrifice a pawn on d4, but we have very good attacking chances. Like this, yeah? So again, here, I think that you are doing great. And you're thinking about some knight 3, maybe queen g4, h takes on g6. It looks very dangerous for your opponent. And that's why he has to do something here. So what is it? Because if he plays queen c7, he wants to push e5. He drops the pawn. Yeah, so takes. The pawn on h7 is also hit in some lines. He defends it. And he'll have to work on the way he is going to get back the pawn. e5 is e4. It's not really helping. a5, rook queen b1, rook c1, b4 is just a pawn, really. So instead of this, maybe queen e7 makes sense. Now he wants to push e5. And now the opponent c5 for him is protected. So now we are going to play knight e5. He tries to smoke you out. And this is where some even very good players have fallen into this. You take on d7, and this has a trap. Because, I mean, bishop d7. It looks so natural, right? Check this out. Takes. Takes. You have to take it. Whoops. Check. Oh my goodness, it's so easy to miss this. And one grandmaster who fell into this was Sam Shankland, who was 2600. So yeah, even very good players that tend to sometimes forget these things. And the threat is knight g5, and it just ends badly. So if the rook walks away, to not avoid the checkmate, you take on f7, you demolish his defenses, and queen e3 is e4. You block the queen. And it just leads to a killing attack. I think Shankland found some very some defense, but ultimately it's just a bad line. You could take with the bishop. It's a common mistake. I mean, at least nowadays, everybody knows this. So you have to take with a queen. And now, again, it doesn't work. This doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. It's a cool idea. It's a very nice idea. But the difference is, black can play g6, and his bishop is not on d7, it's on c8. So you can force a draw. That's a draw. I mean, the idea, it's a nice line, especially if you play against a stronger opponent, you can force a draw immediately, but it's not the win. So it's not accurate. And if this idea doesn't work, he pushes e5. And f4, by the way, I didn't check this. I think he can take on d4. You cannot take with the pawn because the pawn on d4 is under attack. So it just doesn't work. So that's why after queen d7, we're going to play show castle. And let's say he insists on the e5 push. Immediately, I think it doesn't work because of a simple trick. Takes, 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 and bishop h7. It's also some things you should know from the London, like these are some cheapos. But again, the point is that black always wants to play e5 in these positions. So let's say he goes here. We take it. Oh, we play f4. Which, by the way, is not very clear because this position is still very tricky. Your opponent might want to push f5 and play at some point c4 and b5. And that's why I think mostly it's a good idea for you to include a4. Try to slow him down a bit. So if you can include a4 in this setup at the earlier stage, it's probably a good idea. Because if you don't do this, you go for the direct Kingston attack, your opponent might actually develop a pretty serious counterplay. Like this, yeah? b4, and the queen on f3 is actually misplaced. So if you can, include a4. Let's say your opponent closes the king side for good. You are prepping the g4 push. If he goes a6, a5, you block the queen side, which is probably playable for black, but I think he's slightly worse. Your knight is pretty fantastic. So if he goes the slow way, the big idea is that after g6, you develop some Kingston attack, like h5, rook g2, maybe king f2. Looks pretty scary for black. And if he plays like this, you take on f5 and you establish an outpost on e5 for your knight. King h1, put the queen somewhere, double the rooks, maybe h4, h5, and white has the better chances. So that's basically it. That's the Queen's Gambit declined without queen b6. And we have to move on to the next part. All right, let me make some preparations. Okay, here we go. So let's talk about the other setups. What are they? With Queen's Gambit declined, even though technically it's not Queen's Gambit declined because we did not play c4, but how best do you describe this d4, d5? So bishop f4. Let's talk about what happens if black plays bishop f5. So the Slav setup is more analyzed in the next part. With the bishop and f5, our approach will be c4. We want to play queen b3, we want to attack the pawn on b7, and we want to fight for the advantage. Why? Because there's no other way for you to get the opening advantage, that's why. So if you're going to play stuff like e3, bishop d3, c3, knight e2, black's going to trade the bishops, he's going to play e6, c5, knight c6, and you will miss this last square bishop for the Kingston attack. That's why. Of course, you can do that. you can play the equal position, but I think that you can and you should fight for the opening advantage. So c4. So if black plays the c6 stuff, this is analyzed, like I already said, in the next part. And d-takes on c4 is probably a move, but you play e3. And for black, I think it's very dangerous to hold the pawn. This is a very common theme in the Queen's Gambit. Accepted a4, c6, takes, knight c3, and black cannot really hold on to the pawn without big consequences. So also think about stuff like knight e5, queen f3. Just feels very dangerous with the rook on a8 being loose. So maybe he can play a gambit like this, but he's just worse. Again, yeah, knight c3, you take on b4 with the queen. So black cannot really do that. And instead, here, if he gives up the pawn, you just, again, get this position where you have a potentially symmetrical position if black pushes c5, and your pieces are just standing better. So here you have a choice between bishop g5, put the pieces on good squares. Just a very easy game. I did not analyze this in great depth. I just think that white's game is playing itself very easily, or knight e5 if you want, knight e2, knight f3. But anyway, the point is you're flexible with whatever setup you want to do. Yeah. So for example, this bishop g5 is probably a bit more ambitious, but yeah, knight e5 is, I think, also working just fine. So let's focus on the important stuff. Is that after c4, the best black can do is e6. We play queen b3. We target the pawn on b7. And this prompts black some kind of a response. And I think that this move is a bit weird. Because after knight e2, you simply say that the knight on c6 is misplaced. You're going to play stuff like e3, rook c1, maybe a3. And what is the knight doing on c6? Let's say he goes here, e3, here. He wants to play knight a5, kill your pawn on c4. The pawn on b7 cannot be really taken because of knight b4. And we talked about this only from the white's perspective. Now it's your queen who is in trouble. I think it's not worth it. But you can play c5. And now the knight on c6 is weird. Bishop b5. The point is you want to take on c6, play queen a3, knight e5. He simply has practical problems. His pawn structure, the queen side, is pretty stuck. And if he plays bishop d6, according to an engine, I think this was the best move. You take it, and he cannot take with a knight. There's going to be a fork, e4. And the engine said this is equal, but I don't know. Like, it just feels the black is worse, simply worse. Show castle, rook c1, maybe rearrange the knight on c3, something. I don't know. It just feels that white has a very easy game here. So that's why after queen b3, the best move for black is d-takes on c4. And this leads to a pretty forcing line where you have to take on b7, which, by the way, mirrors pretty much what black had to do after your queen b6 on c4. You remember? This was... sorry, where was this? Yeah. After d-takes on c5, he had to take on b2. We talked about one of these principal lines in the London. Here it's very similar. You have to take it. Because if you take on c4, black's going to play c5, or you're just worse. Your queen is misplaced. So that's why you have to accept the challenge, but it's not really a challenge. Meaning you are about to get the queens off the board. Black goes here, queen c7. And there's a pretty important difference that black has to give this check first. Because if he takes on c7, and now gives a check, you don't have to play knight b to d2 automatically. You can play king d1. And with the queens off the board, this leads to a position where black has no compensation basically for the pawn. So for him, this is pretty inaccurate. He has to give a check. Now king d1 is dangerous because black's not going to take on c7, but instead he's going to go for some knight c6 and queen d5. And I think this part is pretty clear that king on d1 is misplaced. So after this check, we play knight e2. And now black should take on c7. King e7, that's the best move according to an engine. Your moves are very easy. And the point is, I think that black is the one who has to prove. Essentially, what does he have for the pawn? Like, it feels he has some initiative, but there's nothing concrete. So the best he can do, I don't know the particular move order, is to go for this position, where he claims that because of his activity at the queen side, he has compensation. And probably he is right. But, a pawn is a pawn after all. And I looked at this line a bit, and I figured out it's not very clear exactly how black is immediately securing the equality, because you're about to secure the pawn with bishop b5. And the best maybe he can do is go here. You play bishop b5. So I would say that black still needs to prove what does he have for it. Needless to say, I mean, this line is pretty popular at the competitive level. And I think that you simply have to go for this. Otherwise, black immediately solves the opening problems. And by the way, that was also the question. Since I posted the news on my YouTube wall earlier that I'm going to do the London, somebody asked, what should black do? How to play against the London? This could be one of those setups. Yeah, this early bishop f5, where for white, if he wants to get any real advantage, he has to give it a try, this c4. Anything else is just harmless, really, because the bishop f5 for black is standing ideal. All right. But like I already said, the Slav setup will be discussed in the next part. Let's talk about other setups. Let's say black plays c5, e3, knight c6, knight e2. And for example, there's this idea when black can play knight h5. So we talked about this. The point is, we don't want to give up the bishop for nothing. The point is, after knight h5, I forgot to check actually what happens after bishop g5. I should have done it. I wrote down only d-Neiksans c5 as the move, because you're winning a pawn. After bishop g5, this was, h6 and g5. h6, g5, knight e5 is necessary, because here you have a good chance to get much worse position. And if you play knight e5, d-Neiksans e5, this is just not good. Yeah, black is doing fantastic. So you can't really do this. And that's why we take the pawn on c5. We give up the bishop, but now black has to think about how is he getting the pawn on c5. So the most direct way to play is queen a5, of course. But there have been some players who like to play g6, the ambitious way, to play the gamut all the way. And now you just secure the pawn. And this leads again to some double-edged position with queen a4, stopping queen a5, stopping bishop a6, short castle, rook e1, and whatever we make of this position. So it's two knights against two bishops. The position is pretty closed, but you do have the pawn. So I would say it's 3-result game. If I'm not terribly mistaken, Stockfish slightly favors you. Not sure what that really means. And the black is, Stockfish very much favors you in this position. So I think it's a pretty great position. So it's a bit risky approach for black. And the more controlled move is queen a5. And here the important move is c4. Because we want to open up the center now. Because we have better developed pieces. Black goes here, a3, here, b4, queen d6, and g3. I think that this is the best line. And your idea is to play for bishop g2, short castle. And the position is opening up and your minor pieces are standing better, even though he has the bishop pair. And if he does this ambitious g6, bishop g7, here rook c1 actually is a surprising move. Not rook b1, what you would think. Rook c1. The point is here for black, it's quite dangerous to win the pawn. So he wins the pawn like this. But again, it's a sacrifice. And we're gaining quite a bit of valuable time. Say knight e7, queen a1. Your pieces stand really well. Knight e4, knight f6 is a threat. So black is here holding on. Knight e5, knight g4, knight h6. Very easy initiative. Queen e5, and black is still experiencing some practical problems with development. So again, all you should know is that the engine favors you. You have an easy game, and he has big problems with the dark squares. right? It's not winning, it's just for black, this position is quite problematic. So he has to be a bit accurate. And in this line, probably he can do something else. Like, I didn't check this. Let me check it a bit more thoroughly. I mean, bishop b2 is such a tempting move. Yeah, so maybe rook d8. Rook d8, you can play engine like c5, queen c7, and some rook e1 idea, some h4 idea. And again, bishop b2 is not working, bishop d7, rook e1, you're going to go for some kings at attack. It's somewhere here. And at best, black is equal. So let's select other moves. Instead of knight h5, black maybe wants to put the bishop at f5 or g4. But the question is, when is the right moment to do this? So the point is, if he plays bishop f5 immediately, he wants to play e6 and get a comfortable position. His pawn is under attack. We take it. And now the bishop at f5 could be a target because of knight e4. And there's also bishop e5 threatening. So if black goes for this position, I think it's practically very dangerous because black's pawn structure is ruined. Stockfish, again, tries to make it work that somehow this is okay, but I think that ultimately the pawn on d5 is a pretty major weakness, even though his knight on e4 is standing great. At least I think it gives you the easy game. And if he plays bishop g4 immediately, now we play c3, e6, and the point is we can't play queen b3. Because after queen b3, queen b6, we take on b6, and there you go, there's the tempo. We're about to play bishop b5. We want to kill his bishop. If he takes it, he has some problems. So I didn't analyze this very deep, but it feels that there's some problems with some squares for him, and white ends up having a slightly better position. So this queen b6 quite does work for him in this line. And if he plays instead queen c8 here, this is a very, very similar approach. Actually, we are going to have a very similar position where c takes on d4, e takes on d4 will be included, and our approach will be different because in that position we want to play knight e5, but here knight e5 doesn't work because of takes, which is what we are going to have, but here black has c4 move, and he's doing very much fine. So here after bishop h5 we are going to play knight h4. We want to trap the bishop with g4, get a bishop pair. And c takes, g4, knight e7 gives nothing. We defend the knight on h4. And if he goes bishop g6, we just get the bishop pair. And it's this position where I'm not really sure when is the right moment to push h4, but you want to go for some kings in attack. That's a hook, h5. Long castle, by the way, is going to be knight e4. You have to be a bit careful, not to rush with this. And it might go to something like this, where black pushes e5, goes for some counterattack, but ultimately I think that you are having a bit better chances here. So that's bishop g4. And I think that a very human approach for black is to include some c takes on d4 quite early, just to avoid all of these unnecessary complications. And here the difference is, if black plays now bishop g4, the line I just showed you, our approach is exactly the same. Queen b3, queen c8, h3. And now, I think you can play knight h4 with the same stuff of g4, but here knight e5 is a bit more effective. Because if he misses it, you already have seen this in this bootcamp before. The threat is to play h5. If he moves the h-pawn, you take on g6, and you ruin his pawn structure. So ultimately, he has to take it. And here, I know this is quite difficult. And if I was you and I would be studying the London and the exchange Caracan, it probably is a good idea to focus when is the right moment to take with the bishop and when is the right moment to take with the pawn. So I think taking with the pawn makes sense when you're ready to go for some immediate kingside attack, meaning your queen is pretty close. But here you see your queen is on b3. It's quite far away from the king side. So here, the best for you is to concretely play bishop e5, which comes with some bishop b5 threats. So he goes here, here, bishop d3, and at some point I suppose he wants to kill the bishop. And this is basically one of the common themes of the exchange Caracan. And that's why, once again, I have to remind you, you have to watch my bootcamp, number 10, exchange Caracan, because I deal with exactly with this setup. h4, knight e5, there was the small game, Ferenc Berkes against Luke McShane, g4, h5, where the Hungarian Grandmaster just demolished McShane. Very, very nice, beautiful model game. Maybe I mentioned this in the bootcamp, in this bootcamp of the exchange Caracan. I already don't remember. But it just gives you this easy attack chances. And by the way, the pawn on g6 for black is not securing the king. On the opposite. It's a hook, something you can target. So maybe the best that black can do is this bishop f5. And now your approach is going to be different. Because you cannot get to these standard positions anymore. But there's the good news. You are not committed to c3 just yet. And now we have a bit unusual approach. We are going to play bishop b5. I also looked at c3 and not h4. But it feels that black at least gets a fine position after bishop g4. And after queen b3, there's a very famous pawn sacrifice on b7 with bishop d6. So you get nothing. And the best you're going to get is some completely... not a symmetrical position, but both bishops are traded and black is perfectly fine. I don't see what you're fighting for here, really. So instead of this, I think this is the best shot you can do. The threat is to play knight e5, c4, queen a4, completely change the course of the game. And if he plays here, knight e5, this is the big idea. You take on c6, you take on c4, and the line actually continues, but black ultimately has problems because of the pawn on c6. Or if instead he plays queen b6, you play c4, you play a4, and again, the threat is to play knight takes on c4 at the right moment to snatch on c6, here. So it's quite a forcing line, which feels quite dynamic, but it ends up with a position where, again, black is slightly worse. He's holding on because of this weakness on c6. You keep pressing. So, of course, Engine finds somehow equality with queen b7, shook castle, and I think it was like this. Oh, sorry, not shook castle. I think it was f3, knight e7, play down a pawn, etc. But I would say this is good odds for you to win the game. So anyway, there's probably longer theory than this. And from black's perspective, this is a pretty good setup for black. But this bishop b5, c4, knight e5 is a powerful idea where you switch away from the classical London setup. Okay, let's move on. Now let's talk about the Slav defense setup. Now the Slav defense, in a classical sense, is if you play c4, black plays c6. Very, very popular defense. But your opponent doesn't know that you are playing the London. So we played it with knight f3. And there's a good chance he's going to play c6 right here. And he's not going to understand the difference because you are about to play c4, right? You are playing d4. And after d4, you are supposed to play c4, right? Let's also have a look at the move knight f6. We're going to play bishop f4, same stuff. Let's say black plays bishop f5. And after c4, so our idea is to play queen b3. Let's say black plays c6, and for him it's like, this is the Slav. Yeah, so why don't we do this? You know, in my opinion, I think that the Slav against the London quite doesn't work. I think it's a bit dangerous setup. So I think after watching this part, you're probably going to agree with me. So we play queen b3. We target the pawn. And I suppose he has to defend it. Because if he does something else like queen c8, I feel that position the queen on the same rank as potentially your rook is quite dangerous. So even without a lot of analysis, I could just say, think about moves like knight c3, e6, and rook c1. And this comes with threats like takes, and knight b5. There's some immediate problems. It's just not a good place for the black queen. So I think he has to play queen b6. Now we play c5. You remember, right? We talked about this. But from the black's perspective. So there's no retreat for the queen on c7. Takes. And I think this is a very, very dangerous line for black. He can easily get in trouble. And one thing you should know is that white often is also quite happy to go for these positions with the bishop on c1 and e3. And this position is just an improvement because the bishop on e4 is going to be more active. So let's say black plays knight e7. One of the most famous setups. We play b4. Our idea is not only to play b5, knight b5, and ruin his pawn structure at the queen side. So for example, like this could be your idea. Let's say b5, take it. He could not obviously take it. Yeah, there's knight e6. But even my idea was to play, let's say, okay, fine. Let's say knight e6, takes, e3, b4, b5, ultimately. So he is in big trouble already, right? And you're just having a fantastic pawn structure. So the question is, when would be the right moment to execute b4, b5? But let's say black walks away from all of this. He plays rook c8. You secure your bishop because you know that in the London, knight h5 is the way how black wants to not only to kill your bishop, but he wants to push e5 because his pawn structure is showing him he should be playing at the king side somehow. So we secure the bishop. We put the knight on b3. And he might want to trade it with bishop d8, but now he has problems. And there's a surprising maneuver, because after bishop c7, we suddenly play b5. And knight b5. And that's it, he's busted. Yeah, rook e8 is incoming, knight d6 is incoming, he's just losing material. It's just very dangerous for him. So he would already have to figure out that there's a castle, but don't get carried away. There's a nuance. If you play knight a5, there's going to be b6. And c takes on b6, there's going to be knight b6 and bishop b4. You could actually lose control of the game. You want to play knight a5, but you want to do it at the right moment. So we play first e3. Let's say he goes here. We fight for some extra space at the king side. And now we play knight a5. Since there's no b6 anymore, b6 is going to be simply bishop a6. So he's dropping material. And if he takes it, pretty much always you take with a pawn, because you enable yourself either this or this, and he's going to have problems to defend a pawn on b7. Very easy to understand. Let's say here, bishop d6, he does carry out his e5 push because he needs some pawn play. The king stands well on d2, and it's something like this. So you can play at the king side, you can play at the queen side, you have bishops, and except of his knight and e6, these are dead pieces. Yeah, so I don't know what he's doing here. So for black, it's very, very dangerous. And maybe the best for him in this position is already to figure out that that's what's coming and to play bishop b1, which is not obvious at all. And you can still carry out the same stuff. You play b4 here. Again, think about e3 and knight h5 being the idea for black. He wants to kill your bishop. He wants to play e5. But there's a nuance. So if you are careless and you're not going to carry out in the wrong order, you're going to play h3 and then play e3 and etc. Black's best setup is g6. To play bishop g7, and he's going to be able to carry out e5. Knight h2 and e5. This is coming. And here black is going to be fine. So we want to be a bit accurate. We start with this move. And don't show your cards just yet. Because after rook a1, I've routed on the main move e6. But let's say he plays g6. Now you can play e3. The threat is to play b5. So he walks away. Sorry. So he walks away. Now there's going to be h3 here, and there's this key idea, g4. You stop this idea all along. Let's say castles. You can play. This is quite a nice idea by the engine. Here, here, here. h4 and bishop h3. So you don't play bishop e2. And black is, again, suffering a bit. So ultimately, maybe black can play knight h5 and g6. And this position is, by the way, still pretty great. Bishop c3, great place for the bishop. Bishop d3, and black is suffering. Knight c3, if he's going to do this, b-takes on c3, c4, you're having a pawn majority of the queen side. For black, it's simply worse position. And also, if he would play e6, I think e6 mainly is a mistake in these positions. Black is not supposed to play like this. He should at least look for some e5 push. So now you play h3, e3, and you can throw in the mix this g4. g4, h4, bishop d3, you're playing on both flanks. Keep the idea of knight e2, knight b3, knight a5 at the right moment. It's just a very sad position for black. So he has to walk a tightrope here, which is find the right moment to play this g6. And maybe he's surviving this, but Engine is not very optimistic about black's chances. So ultimately, I think it's just not a good line for black to go here, at least with this move order. So that you have to understand, the main line of the Slav is the bishop is on c1 and the pawn is on e3. So if we compare with main lines of the Slav, the bishop is on f4, and then you play e3. I think it should matter. You're getting more prospects because of this Doxwell bishop. So let's have a look at what happens if black plays c6. Now we play bishop f4. And here maybe black can try to play queen b6 immediately, target the pawn on b2. And the only difference here is that we are fine by playing queen c1. You can probably sacrifice the pawn. Yeah, I didn't really analyze this in such great depth. You can play knight e2, c4, give up the pawn and play in the same fashion as we discussed in it was the first part, I think, where we give up the pawn to gain time. Even if there's no forced theory, you just know that at least sacrificing a pawn for 2 tempi should be good enough for you. But queen c1, I think it's easier move because our idea is going to be playing e4, e3, c4, knight c3, and c5. I just think it's a bit easier. And now the point is, if black plays bishop g4, we allow him to take out f3. Don't worry about it. It's going to secure your control of the center. c4. This is the big idea. We gain space. And we play b4. So, I don't know. Does he have to take out f3? Maybe. But if he doesn't, this already is resembling to some of the positions we discussed, where black is just worse. Very important move here. Yeah, this line. And black is dreaming about the c5 push, but I have a feeling it's never quite going to come. And in this position, black again is just a sitting duck. Yeah, so a4, b5, there's no f6, e5. Black can forget about it. So he's just sitting and watching while you are doing some bad things to him at the queen side. So I think it's a fantastic line for white. And maybe black can play bishop f5 instead. You go e3, you play c4. So you want to play c5, knight c3, maybe even c5 immediately. I didn't check this. Yeah, so yeah, c5 is what the top choice of the engine, c5, b4, basically the same line. For the simplicity, you can do that. Yeah, but knight c3 is also good. And let's say he plays knight h5. He wants to kill your bishop. We talked about this. And in some lines, you have access to this move, bishop b5. f6 is provoking weakness. I think actually he drops a piece here. f6, yeah, you take on b8, you play h3. So this is not very good, obviously, for black. And if he plays this, h3, take with the knight. We gave up the Doxwell bishop for the knight, but you gain so many things. Look at this bishop on f5. It's a target. It's in trouble. And this maneuver you already know. You want to play h5, you want to trap the bishop. And what is he supposed to do here? I don't know. That just looks very bad for black. So it quite doesn't work. Knight h5 is inaccuracy. Maybe he plays knight e7, and now you play c5 here and h3. Secure against yourself against knight h5. But anyway, listen. You can probably improvise with the move orders a bit. I think that this Slav setup is one of the easiest setups you're ever going to face. You know that you have to play c4, c5, and knight c3 and b4, and you know that knight h5 is a thing, so I'm pretty sure that there's more than one good ways for you to play it out. And yeah, this is not a very good position for black. So he's desperately looking for the c5 push, and even if he does it, it just doesn't give him any happiness. Yeah, like maybe takes and takes and takes and takes and some knight b6. Engine says this is a move. a5, knight c4, a6. No matter how far you push this, but black is just not doing well. Instead of this, obviously queen b6 is not, mandatory. Black will play knight f6. We play e3. Our idea is to play c4 next. So I suppose you want to bring out the bishop. Let's say you go here, bishop g4. You can play c4, knight c3. It's still good. But with the bishop on g4, there's this very effective plan. You play knight e2. And the idea is that after h3, if he takes an f3, you take with a queen, you go for a long castle. So you want to go for the kingside attack. You take with a queen, you play g4, h4. It already starts to look really shaky for black. E5, you walk away. You don't take on e5 yourself. Keep the queens on the board. And for example, here, let's say black commits to e5. Here it's a mistake because of bishop h3, and still g5 is a big problem. And I don't know what... how is he supposed to answer to this? Because the king on c8 suddenly is in the harm's way. And if he walks away with bishop h5, we kill the bishop. g4, knight e5, the threat is h4, h5. A very common idea in the Slav. So in the Slav, this is a common response for black, knight e7. We kill the bishop, and again, same maneuver, queen f3. Queen f3, long castle, h4, h5, bishop d3. If you want to know what Engine says in this position, in Engine's language, +1 for white. So it's just a very bad position. You have space, you have bishops, and you have an attack. And black doesn't have anything concrete against your king. So maybe the best he can do is to play bishop f5. Because I also looked at this g6 move that some people like to play this, but I don't think it has any standalone value. You still play c4, knight c3, bishop e2. So typically in this position, the last bishop goes on e2. And if he plays knight e7 here, I think the simplest move, again, you have many good moves in this position, like short castle, rook c1, whatever. With the knight on d7, the simplest move for you is to play c takes on d5. You go for a symmetrical position, but black setup is far from ideal. Rook c1, knight e5, queen b3, with a lot of pressure at the queen side. So g6 is not something you should be afraid of. So bishop f5 probably is the main move, of course. Yeah, so it's the main idea of the Slav. And now we play c4. c4, e6, and queen b3. Same stuff. So black has problems with the pawn on b7. And obviously defending it, if he plays queen c8, I think the queen here is simply misplaced. Like I already said, you can use the c file to target... Sorry, my arrows are still pretty bad. You can target the queen. So knight c3. And the only difference here is that, let's say black decides to, at this moment, to kill your bishop with knight h5. There's some standalone funny lines that after bishop e5, knight e7, you can actually take on d5 and e4. There's a sudden surprising shot in the center, and because of his queen on d8, all the tactics are in your favor. So you see we're threatening with a checkmate on f7. Take it. Here, bishop c4, here, long castle. I already don't want to look at this. It just looks so bad for black. And it's very difficult to make the next move. Bishop c5 is going to be knight c2, e4. So this here an engine somehow is calling this. Yeah, so with the king of the fate, I would say the black is just dead. He cannot do that. And if he plays knight e7, we take on d5, and now you see the queen on c8 is problematic. Yeah, here I think taking on d5 is the right moment, because if you're going to play rook c1, you're going to be greedy, your opponent's going to take on c4. And then for you, it's going to be much harder to exploit black queen placement on c8, even though it's great for you. It's a great position. But I think it's more concrete to take on d5. And this is a problem. Knight b5, knight c7. Knight h5 is just knight e5. So he doesn't defend the d5 square anymore. It doesn't work. And if he plays a6, you secure the bishop. And here, by the way, is a pretty cool idea. If your opponent is unaware and he plays some normal developing moves, there's this idea of g4, g5, which, by the way, happens in the London more than once. You push the bishop on, with a pawn, you push the knight on h5, and the threat is knight e5. And yeah, this bishop e2, knight e5, bishop g4. I think we already had a very similar line where you could play h4, which also is one of the top choices of the engine, h4, bishop h3, to create some pins here. It's very problematic for black, but according to an engine, this is more accurate. Yeah, and black is just lost. He's just lost. So he has to like walk a tightrope basically here. After h3, h6, g4. This is losing because of g5 and knight e5. He cannot do that. And here you just have a fantastic dynamic position. Black has survived the onslaught somehow, but you still keep attacking chances. The king of the pawn, rook g1, very interesting short castle, h4, g5, he could castle himself. And the biggest difference is that probably none of the kings are going to castle. You are definitely not castling, but his king is always in danger. So engine gives here like 0.5 advantage to white, but I think from a practical standpoint, black's position is even more dangerous than that. And that's why queen c8 is just not a good idea for black. And he has to play something else. But what is it? Because if he plays b6, you play knight e5, and he has problems with the pawn on c6. It just doesn't feel right. Meaning, maybe now he can try to kill your bishop, but the simpler move is allow him to do that. I mean, here, engine says some g4. g4, g takes, knight e2, whatever. And big advantage to white. If you want, you can pursue this. It's very interesting, fun line. But I think that the simpler move is that you play knight e2. Now you allow him to take, but he's gonna have big problems because of those weakened light squares. So long castle. If he goes here, there's g4, h4. Looks very dangerous. And if he takes on c4, you're still the one with a lot of questions here. Yeah, so I pushed the line a bit, but it just feels that I'll just show you the final line of this position, where again you play g4 and you have a free attack. So no matter how you look, black is suffering everywhere. And so this knight h5, I know I'm focusing on this quite a lot, but it is a very common theme in these Slav and London setups. He wants to kill your Daxpo bishop. And if he plays like bishop d6, you just stop it. You stop knight h5. And black is suffering here. So c takes on d5 is going to be knight c3, knight b5. And this is the best he can do. Literally, yeah? And it leads to some very unpleasant positions with knight b5. He has to trade it here. And he goes here. So analyze this line even further, where black is making heroic efforts to survive. But I don't think he's going to do it. So it's still a very, very unpleasant endgame. So move 22, you're definitely pushing with a big advantage. Maybe with very accurate play, black can survive this, but I just don't think that b6 is a very serious move. And that leads the question, so what is black supposed to do? So what is he supposed to do? And the only move really is queen b6, but you already know the answer. We are going to play c5, force him to take. And you know all the plans. You know the plans that we have to secure our Daxwa bishop against knight h5. And look at this. Black is committed to e6. He cannot play g6 anymore, which I told you is the best setup for black. Yeah, so let's say, again, we play the same setup. You can improvise. Yeah, you can play knight c3, b4, knight e2, knight b3. You can play knight e2. But the main idea is you have to keep a close eye on black's counterplay with e5. So let's say here, b4, knight b3, knight a5. We talked about this. You take with a pawn, you play rook a4. There's no e5. According to an engine, black is lost. Black is lost. Simply because of the space, two bishops, and no counterplay. That's it. Yeah, so I just do not believe that the Slav defense against the London is a very good setup. And maybe the best thing he can do is to start with knight f6, bishop f4, f5, and c4, play e6. Play this one. But this is not quite the Slav, is it? This is some sort of Queen's Gambit, the client we talked about in the previous part, where black is the one who is fighting for equality. And yeah, I just do not think that here black is having very good prospects, because your plan is very straightforward: e3, c4, queen b3, knight c3, sometimes c5, and black is having some major problems. All right, that being said, let's move on. And the next part is going to be Queen's Indian defense. All right, here we go. We start to move d4, black plays knight f6, and here the question is, should we play bishop f4 or knight f3? I think for the simplicity, let's stick to the move knight f3. It doesn't really matter. There are some experts who believe that bishop f4 is a bit more accurate, and maybe with the idea that not always white is going to play knight f3, but I think that this difference is really tiny. And when I was looking at these lines, I obviously was looking at Kamsky's games, because Gata Kamsky is one of the big experts of the London. And sometimes against Gata, people will play c5. And his favorite response against c5 is e3. But to be honest, I do not like it, because after e3, queen b6, either black plays knight c3 or knight a3, doesn't really matter. Here black can take the pawn on b2. So queen takes on b2, knight b5, we are threatening to deliver a fork. Black plays knight e5, he defends against this, and he also is threatening in some lines either to kill the bishop or even to play knight c3. So this very often in Kamsky's games against higher opponents would end with a repetition. So I quite do not like it. And I think that after c5, the principal continuation for white is to play d5. Let's say you're playing with the bishop f4, move order. And now, if black plays something like queen b6, there is a very similar line in the Trompovsky, where we play bishop g5, black plays knight e4, and after bishop f4, there's this queen b6 idea. But here, I think this is a worse version for black, because we play knight c3, we want to play e4, and for black, it's quite dangerous to accept the pawn with queen b2 because of bishop d2. Meaning he wins a pawn, but you have a massive lead in development. Yeah, so let's say d6, f4, queen d8, bishop c4 here. Yeah, I don't know. Who could enjoy this position from black's perspective? Your initiative just develops itself. Again, a pawn is a very small price to pay for it, so I think that it's just not a very good setup for black. And if he doesn't do it, you just grab the center, and the queen on b6 is weird. So that's why I think it's a no-brainer that d5 is stronger. And maybe instead of this, black would try to play b5. And I saw some high-level games here. Probably they're actually the top controls, meaning you can sacrifice a pawn, play e4. There's a simpler move also. You can play c4, knight c3. Should be completely fine. But e4 is like the trendy continuation. You play a gambit, and after knight e4, queen f3, you just develop very strong initiative. Yeah, so let's say queen a5, knight e2. If black retreats, there's this idea c4, knight c3, and according to an engine, black already has to give up the pawn on b5 not to get in trouble. So there's this line, and also black accepts and walks away. In this position, yeah, some h4, bishop c4, your initiative just develops very quickly, and probably black already has to give up the extra pawn by playing a shoot castle, rook e7, and try to survive. So this is like typical engine stuff, and if you want to look into this direction, be my guest. But I think we're going to stick with knight f3. And I'm just telling what's the difference between bishop f4 and knight f3. And if black instead plays something like d6, yeah, you just play knight c3. This line also is quite fashionable at the pro level. Some players like to play this. They like to play this, e5, bishop g5, bishop e7. And now the simplest approach for you is to give up your darks for bishop. Here it's fine. We play e4, shook castle, knight f3, here a4, here knight e2, and these positions are always in white's favor. Because no matter what black does, if black plays a5, we play h4, the threat is to play h5. I suppose he has to stop it, and now we take it. You see the pawn on h5 is under attack. He cannot take with the g-pawn. His king is exposed as well. And now we just anchor a minor piece on e4, or just a better position. I think it's kings in and defense gone wrong for black. At least that's how I feel it. And instead of this, if he plays something else, we fight for space advantage. f5 is a6, fight for the light square weaknesses. And if he stops it, there's h4. The threat is to play h5. He stops it. And yeah, this position, we want to play g4. Black plays f5. Now it's a bit not ideal for us to take on f5 because he's going to take with the g-pawn and we cannot recapture on h5 with the queen. We would have to do it with the bishop, which is not ideal. So instead you can do this. Queen d2. Let's say black goes here. Kill his last square bishop. Queen g5. And again, it just feels pretty bad. So anyway, like probably there's a longer theory than this, but at least you're going to know the starting moves. And I just don't think it's a very good setup for black. So yeah, like this c5 doesn't really accomplish anything. And instead of this, he probably can play e6, and now we play knight f3, and we transpose the main lines. But I mean, let's just stick to the main move order. Let's play knight f3. Let's not reveal our cards. And the difference is that here, if black plays c5, after c5, we play d5. And after b5, otherwise, you are just about to play knight c3 and e4 for a fantastic position. So he tries to somehow get to the pawn on d5. This is the simplest approach, c4 and knight c3 and e4. So it leads to some simple game like maybe knight e2, knight c4, eventually some Benko gambit like positions where white always has a slight advantage. So yeah, ultimately, ultimately that's it. And in the next and final part, we're going to talk about the king's in and defense, which is g6. And I will be advocating Kamsky's approach against it, which is c3 and bishop f4, with the idea to play knight e2 on e4. So the point is the move order doesn't really matter. And I think for your simplicity and just to confuse the opponent a bit, it does make sense a bit to include knight f3, the second move, not to reveal your cards just yet. All right, so, but we're still at the queen's in the defense territory, e6. We play a bishop f4. And the queen's Indian typically starts with b6. But your opponent could also throw in the mix c5 immediately, try to demolish your center. We play e3. And I think I read this in my YouTube chat, because when I post an announcement that I'm working on my London bootcamp, that sometimes black tries to trick you with moves like knight c6, bishop e2, and h6, meaning black wants to play d5 and bishop d6. If you include h3, you don't have access to bishop g3. Yeah, we talked about this. But I don't think it's very serious because we can just castle short, keep the flexibility at the queen side. And if black plays knight h5, you play d5. That's the idea. You conquer the d5 square. You're just better. I think so. Let me check it. By the way, I forgot to check this particular moment. I think this was the this was the one, yeah? Yeah. So d5 is definitely a very, very solid advantage to white. So I'm correct. And if black plays d5, we play knight e2. And now knight h5. He does kill the bishop. But we play bishop e5. We play c3. And this is one of those moments where him having the pawn on h6 doesn't really favor at all. Because let's say after knight e5, we play f4, and it's going to be much harder, if not impossible, for him to smoke out the knight on e5 because of 6. It's just leaving a big hole on g6. Yeah, so I think we're going to still go for some classical bishop d3 and king set attack. So yeah, this is one of those moments when he would wish the black pawn was on h7. But I don't think there's going to be many opponents against you who will be playing this much trickery. And if he plays immediately knight h5 without h6, yeah, you just play d5, queen d5, and you just enjoy the control of the d5 square. And yeah, I think again black is just worse. So I think makes sense, like limit opponent's pieces. Show castle, rook e1, rook d1, the bishop on e7 is particularly bad. So I don't think it's a good position for black at all, even though you have double pawns. And maybe what he can still try to trick you is this queen b6 move. And now there's some standalone lines. And here the point is we cannot quite play queen c1. And again, this is the moment that you probably want to pay attention to, not to mix up. And that's what I told you. The best way for you to figure out what is the right move order is to pay attention to the opponent's threats and ask yourself, can he apply this threat? Can he apply that threat? So you know he wants to play knight c6, hits the pawn, we play c3, and you know he wants to kill your bishop. So you can't save your bishop. And mostly we do follow the principle, do not give up your dark bishop without any fight. So here, bishop g5, bishop h4, I think it's gonna run into this. And takes, bishop g7 and d5, there's a good chance you're just worse. You don't have any flexibility, you don't have any pawn play, so it's just a very static position. And if you walk away, it's basically the same story, yeah? Takes, d5, you're just worse. So we have to pay attention to the opponent's threats. We can't play queen c1, b3 just feels weird. So we're going to play knight a3. Knight a3 comes with threats to play knight b5 and knight c4. And for him, taking the pawn is just bad. Yeah, let's say here, we play knight b5. We already know the gambit from some other lines. We're threatened with a fork. He goes here. And here's a pretty nice sequence. First, we include this move. He has to take it. We have a draw in the pocket, but we want to go for more. Bishop c4. And we are threatening, again, to play at the right moment to play rook b1. And I forgot to check what was after knight c3. Let me check it very quickly. Now that I'm looking at this, knight c3 is a check here and queen c1. Okay, he drops the rook, just like that, yeah? And after queen b4, very accurate move is bishop e2. There's no discovered check that is harming you. He's simply dropping the rook. Okay, I suppose this makes sense. So if he plays like a6, you go here, and his position is just collapsing because he's dropping the queen. So he cannot really do that. Taking on b2 is very dangerous, if not just straight lost. If he plays d5, it's a mistake or inaccuracy. I think these positions in general are pretty bad. Your knight on b5 feels fantastic. His knight on a6 and queen on b6 are disconnected from the game. And if he tries to get rid of your knight, disconnecting the bishop on f1, you play a4, b3 to follow. He's just suffering. So this is not good for black at all. And if he takes on d4, this is pretty important. We play knight c4. We target the queen. Bishop b4 is very easy. We cover with the knight. He can't play queen c5 because of bishop d6. He's dropping something. So it just gives you a fantastic position, like you're about to play c3. Black is losing a million tempi in this position. It's just not a very good position for him. So he has to give a check. And now you play c3. It's a nice gambit that you would have to know. Black has no choice. He has to accept it. And here there's some fashion. The fashion is that b takes on c3 is a move, where for black accepting the pawn is dangerous, and it goes like this, where you're having some fantastic blockade on the dark squares, but ultimately, if black is very accurate, yeah, maybe he's somehow surviving this. I just show you very quickly because I'm not going to focus on this. I just think that the a3 move is a bit easier. You play a3, and the point is he has to go for c2 check. Because if he doesn't, if he plays queen c5, you play b4, and it's just bad news for black. You're down 2 pawns, but your initiative is just flying. You're about to play rook d1 and knight e6 to follow, at least. And if he goes here, after rook d1, here Engine starts to come up with some funny ideas to sacrifice a piece for how many pawns, but black is just much worse in every single line. So maybe I should have expanded this a bit to show you how it finishes. Let's say he plays some human move. Queen h5, knight c6, takes, knight e5, bishop e2, bishop f3, g4 in some lines. So the queen is in harm's way. So it's an excellent gambit. Black is lost already. He cannot do that. So basically, he has to play c2 check. We take it, takes, we take with a king. We double threats knight e6 and knight b6. Pretty much the only move for him is to go here, b5. And again, pretty much the only move is d5 because the other move is knight e4. Try to go for some counterattack, and I don't think it works. So at least a very simple sequence. Give a check, takes, so you're simply trapping the knight on h1 to get 2 minor pieces for the rook. So that's it basically. Yeah, so not much to see. Your bishop on d6 is a monster, so for black it's a very dangerous position. I'm actually amazed how Stockfish can still hold this somehow. So basically the best for him is to play d5. We take on a6, we take on c4, and in this position the final accuracy is king e2, and I think the black is just suffering. So it's very uneasy defense for him because your pieces are more active, and if he goes for this, the pawn on a7 is dropping. There's no rook b8 because your bishop e4 takes away the square. I think it's quite important. And if he plays knight e5, probably the simplest move you can do is to make him suffer the IQP. You're temporarily down a pawn, but you avoid his bishop f6. You rearrange the pieces, and according to an engine, black is tiny bit worse. But, from a practical point of view, it just feels that black's position is a nightmare. You have no weaknesses. He has worse pawn structure. You have way more active pieces. Those double pawns at a-file don't really matter. I'm going to pick this position any day, any time for white. So this is one of those positions where I think engine doesn't fully understand the dangers, even though it's like one of the lines that black keeps playing here. And the best part is it's pretty forced. Yeah, so you have this endgame, no risk for you. And ultimately, black doesn't accomplish anything you wanted. All right, so let's go to the queen's Indian defense with b6. We play e3. And here the difference is that black's idea is to play c5 at some point, but it's not here. He cannot play here c5. It's a very bad move. Because suddenly you play knight c3. And knight c3, this mirrors some Jabava London ideas, but your idea is to play knight b5 or d5. And he cannot do this. At least I think so, yeah? So you play knight b5, you play queen d4, and it just, even if he kills your bishop, it just gives him a very difficult position to play. some h4 attack, knight e6 at the right moment. I don't think it's a good choice for black at all. And if he stops your knight b5 and he plays a6, now there's d5. d5, b5, e4. And this position is, again, incredibly dangerous because if black proceeds and wins the pawn on e4, we take it. He could take with the d pawn. If he takes, we trade the queens and we play knight b6. It's going to cost him the knight or the exchange or whatever. His entire queen set falls apart. And this just leads to a fantastic gambit. Queen e2, knight g5, long castle. So even with the naked eye, we can tell that for black, yeah, it's very, very dangerous. Show castle some. I didn't check it. What happens after show castle? There's maybe some killing tactics already. I'm going to check it right now. It says show castle. Immediately knight e6. Knight e6 takes. Bishop h7. King h7 takes. Queen e6. Yeah. Just lights out. The black king is too exposed. The white black is not developed at all, so he's gonna lose something on top of that. So it's just bad. And if black plays bishop b7, queen e2. Yeah, this was actually the fancy line. I remember this. Yeah, this was one of the fanciest lines where Stockfish was giving me some lovely lines like, look at this, g4. To play rook g1 and play a gambit, g5, here. It could be very much fun to play. Knight e5, hit the knight on h5. So fishy random chess, yeah. Knight g4, check, queen f3. But ultimately, white is the one with a lot of fun, with a great position and a solid opening advantage. So it's just not a good line. I think we can agree on this. So c5 is the wrong moment to play. And one more thing is that also in the queen's inner defense, you definitely want to keep an eye on black's knight h5 at all times. So I try to do it like right now. But the big difference is I don't think it's a good moment to do it because there's a shocking response. You play bishop g5 and after bishop e7, you play knight e5. And it's not to win the knight on h5. It's to give a double attack on the pawn on f7 and the rook on a8. That's the big idea. So that's why it doesn't work. And if black retreats with the knight, then why did he play knight h5, knight f6 in the first place? Yeah, so he's losing valuable time. Okay, so here black has a difference. He has a different choice. He can play bishop e7 and bishop b7. One thing you should understand, both moves are a bit different. Because if black plays bishop e7, this means he waits for your bishop on d3 so that he can play bishop a6. This is one idea. And the second idea is that he wants to play knight h5 and trap your bishop on f4. So there's a move order difference. If your opponent plays, maybe we're going to start with bishop b7. Here, I think the simplest one is h3, and I did look at Gatakamsky's games, and I think that he recommends a pretty good setup. Also, I was thinking, is there room for h4? I think there's definitely room for h4 and some long castle ideas. So anyway, after bishop b3, we're going to play h3, secure the bishop. If black plays now c5, I think the simplest approach you can ever do is to play c3, and after c takes on d4, do not completely disregard the move c takes on d4. Engine likes it. Engine says it's completely fine. Like you want to play knight c3, rook c1, bishop d3, have a slight advantage in the opening phase. And I think black's going to be slightly passive. And here after bishop e7, the point is now we play bishop d3. Black is committed to bishop b7, so bishop a6 will be losing already tempo for him. And after c5, Kamsky prefers to play show castle, so I think we're going to stick with this. Because the point is, you could play also c3, and after castles, c takes on d4, we're going to take with the c pawn. Again, I think it's a pretty great position. But after d5, Once he commits to d5, after c takes on d4, we want to go for e takes on d4. Maybe I should elaborate this a bit more clearly, why I am quite cautious to c takes on d4 and e takes on d4 in general, because I'm a bit afraid that you might misunderstand these positions after bishop a6 takes, and black is going to play d6 and play at the pawn minority with b5 and a5. And I was not sure if I fully understand these positions myself. So I had to look at Kamsky's games to figure it out. And that's what I'm about to present you. I think this is also the reason why Kamsky does not commit to c3, because he has a very concrete idea. But you can do this. You can do this still. And this is where you can carry out these common ideas that we talked about in the Queen's Gambit declined, with black not playing queen b7. Same stuff. It's happening. Yeah, d takes, queen g4. There's a bit different line. Engine was having some fun. Give up the knight only to play rook d1. So that there's no knight e4. You take on e4 back, and the queen on d8 is pinned here. e4 or h4 to follow what has pretty good prospect for a king's attack. And if black tries to smoke you out, we have some similar ideas, either this or this. We put the knight on d4. We talked about this already before, so I don't think your approach dramatically changes. But yeah, Kamsky likes this. So he likes to keep the pawn on c2 being flexible. And there's a very concrete idea. Meaning, if now black plays c takes on d4, we take with the pawn, e-pawn. Look at this. He keeps the pawn on c2. He waits for black to commit to knight d7. And now comes a4. So the point of a4, white is threatening to play a5. If black goes here, there comes the waiting move. And after queen c7, there comes c4 with a5 idea, so the black cannot walk past it. And if black stops it, there comes knight b1. And Kamsky had played some games. And in this line, and according to an engine, he has a much better position already. So after rook e8, if black waits, now we play a5. B takes on a5, it's quite easy. I think there's going to be knight c4 or knight b3. I don't know which more accurate one. Take with a5, and you have an easy target on a6 in the long run for black at the queen side. And after b5, we play c4. Takes, knight c4, and this is a great outpost. This is a great attack. Here, rook e3, rook b3. And I think the black has some practical problems with the queen's placement. Yeah, all right. So ultimately, black needs to be a bit careful here. And I figure out this is the easiest setup you can do to keep the pawn on c2 for the time being. Wait for black to commit to knight e7. I did not really check what happens after knight c6. I could actually check it. So black would be stopping a4, a5. Let's say he goes knight c6, probably some c3 stuff here. And let's say rook c8. And most likely you're going to go for some king's attack anyway. I would not be surprised to see some h4 stuff happening. Something like maybe a4, rook d1, and throw pieces at the king. Maybe some knight g5 at the right moment, h4, h5. So according to an engine, it's a solid advantage to white. And typically black does put a knight on d7 in these positions because he wants to go like this, maybe play e5. And yeah, this a4 apparently is very effective. So instead of this, maybe black can be smart. He can play bishop e7. And I think this is the smartest approach, because I think that black should be very much interested to trade the last with bishops. So here, we're going to stick to h3. But I thought that since black is committed to bishop e7, it makes a lot of sense to go for the Nimzo. Yeah, why not? Because I was looking at this, I was looking after bishop b7. I was looking at Nimzo stuff like c4, but the point is, this is the main line of the Nimzo, where, okay, maybe not the main line, meaning you have committed to bishop f4 and it leads to some standalone exciting positions after knight e2, a3, and whatever. But the point is, I was not sure if this is the best way for you to go. But if black is committed to bishop e7, I think c4 does make sense. And now after c4, let's say black kills your bishop. Now it's fine because we are about to play knight c3, queen c2 along castle. Let's say takes, bishop e7, queen c2, h6. Knight, very easy game. Yeah, and it also kind of resembles the Slav approach we had in the Slav chapter. So I looked at this briefly, and maybe I'm not going to go into this too much in detail. So if you're interested, you can check the PGN. I left it as an extra alternative. And also, instead of c4, I thought there's this engine move, which is a complete novelty to play rook g1. Yeah, some g4, h4 ideas. According to Stockfish, it's completely fine. It's a very much fine move. Nobody has played it yet. And there's some crazy stuff, like check this out. He wants to kill your bishop. We play g4. We take on f6. We play g5, h4. White is just better. Long castle is incoming. Or maybe the idea is that after, if he goes here, we play g4, we play h4. No opening theory, but it's interesting. And then we keep things flexible with how do we want to develop the pieces at the queen side. I did not analyze this very deeply. I just noted the rook g1 could be very interesting in case you have problems with the main lines. But yeah, let's stick to h3. This is what Gata plays. Shoot castle. And here the point is we don't rush with bishop d3. At least Kamsky doesn't. Because if you play bishop d3 immediately, black is simply using the fact that your bishop has to move again. So takes here. And I try to make it work. Like have a center. If black plays d5, we have a very good kings in an attack pawn structure with e5. I thought it should be pretty great. That's why I think it makes sense for me to do at some point some separate bootcamp on this. And this is what I taught in the Charlotte Chess Center, this Winter Elite training camp. But yeah, I think here ultimately black is fine. He keeps the center flexible. He goes aggressive at the queen side. And according to an engine, the position is just equal. I don't know. Yeah, I'll leave it up to you to decide. So knight e2 appears to be more accurate. c5, c3. And here the point is, after c takes on d4 here, I think that taking with the e-pawn is not very effective anymore. Because now black can trade your bishops. And I think that this entire approach of a4 with last with bishops gone is no longer as effective as it was. And you're also committed to c3 here. And black is going to play stuff like queen c8, queen b7, knight b8, knight e7, a6, b5, and maybe knight e5. Maybe you can still go for the kingside attack, but you're missing out the last with bishop for this. So I don't like this position. I mean, it's completely fine for white, but I do not like it. I do not understand it. Maybe I haven't studied it enough. So here I think c takes on d4 is just going to be easier choice. Now we take with the c pawn. We want to play bishop d3 and at some point push e4. And let's say black trades the bishops, which is fine. Queen c8, we block the knight from the game by playing a3, rook e1. And our idea is to grab the center with e4. And if black blocks us, we can go for some g4, kingside attack. Yeah, so g4, g5, bishop h2, you already have seen this maneuver before. h4, knight e5, very interesting position. And I think the black has good chances to get worse. Yeah, so we are about to dominate the dark squares at the king side. Of course, we have to watch out for the counterplay at the c file as well. But, I mean, you can give up the pawn on b2 if you have to and just throw everything at the king side. It feels very, very good. And, yeah, so maybe black can play bishop a6 immediately. As you can see, there's many tricky move orders. Now we take it and we have not at least wasted the tempo for the bishop. Castles, c takes on d4, c takes on d4. If black plays here d5, now we can go still for some kingshead attack, meaning knight e5, bishop g5, and now again it changes. Now after c takes on d4, we would play e takes on d4. So basically the rule is this: as soon as the black pawn is on d5, we take with the e pawn. Maybe you can still play with the c pawn. I don't know. Like, listen, those differences are so tiny, but this is the idea. We have some kingshead attack ideas, and specifically here again, e takes on d4 kind of makes more sense. And you're going for some sort of a kingshead attack, even though it's not a lot. It's something, at least, I think. And if black goes here, we play e4, we grab the center, takes. And here, if black plays d5, our idea is to play e5, h4, g3, king g2, knight f1, knight h2, knight g4, go for kingshead attack. Angel loves this position for white. We're going for the kingshead attack. If you're going to get the queen on g4, it's fantastic. Very easy game to play. So black probably shouldn't do this and play queen b7. But here at least I have an impression that you're doing something. Because let's say he goes for the obvious move, d5. Again, we set up the kings in and attack pawn structure. And if he plays this, the obvious move, I'm not sure the rook is doing anything there. And actually rook c8, suddenly there comes a shocking move d5. d5 and knight e4. And just like that, he's in trouble. The rook has nowhere to go. So he's about to be trapped. And yeah, finally, maybe he has to play d6, and you just set up this position, yeah? Rook c2, now it's queen d3. And by the way, this is a shocking move, because rook c8 is a big mistake. Can you imagine this? Rook b2, knight c4, this is pretty clear. The rook on b2 is trapped. But rook c8, the idea is crazy. You take on d6, you play e5. So where's the big idea? Take on f6, you play knight e4, you're about to start the deadly kingshead attack, and finally comes knight c5. This sequence is so easy to miss for black from afar. Very easy to fall into this. And finally, the best that black can do is go here. And now we just rearrange the pieces for some kingshead attack. Again, d5, z5. And according to an engine, it's about balance, but I think that white is slightly better because of some chances to the kingshead. Probably at the right moment you want to go for some e5 push, I would think. I just do not know when is the right moment to do it. Maybe h4, h5 makes sense to be included a bit earlier. That's pretty much it about the queen's in and defense. Yeah, I was very much inspired by Kamsky's games. Like, I checked all of his repertoire, what he's playing, because he's been practicing the most. And yeah, but I think actually it makes sense to combine it with a Nimzo when black doesn't rush with when black commits to bishop e7. Then it makes sense to play the Nimzo. Maybe again I should have explained this a bit more thoroughly, because now for black to play bishop b4, it's a loss of a tempo, and I suppose it should matter. So Nimzo is a very good setup for white, unless black can play immediately bishop b4. Hope you understand my thought process. All right, let's move on to the final part of this bootcamp. Hope you're not yet tired. That's going to be the king's in and defense. So the king's in and defense, I decided to copy Gadakamsky's approach. I think it's a very easy to learn system, but there's some flaws, obviously. So after d4, knight f6, either bishop f4 or knight f3, I don't think, again, it really matters. For the sake of simplicity, you want to maybe stick to the same move, knight f3. This is going to be our approach. c3, knight e2, and push e4. All right, doesn't really matter. But why I think that Kamsky decided to play this? So the move c3, it serves as a psychological block to stop black from carrying out the best idea, which is c5. So c3 kind of says, you're going to play c5 because I'm going to take on c5, and yet you're not going to take on c5. Because now after c3, c5, I think that here black gets a fantastic gambit. I should have checked it a bit thoroughly. I didn't write down any lines. I think I was doing a bit later. This is a fantastic gambit for black because black is going to play like, yeah, maybe knight a6. And you're basically committed to b4 and b6 and take and queen b6. According to an engine, white is slightly better. Maybe you can make it work, but it looks a bit awkward to me. So I think that also Kamsky himself, pretty much he never takes on c5. If there's an early c5, it's like a psychological block to stop black from doing this, and you can actually still take on c5 and investigate, but like actually according to an engine, this is more accurate. Bishop g7, knight e2, and now knight a6 is more accurate because if you play here b4, then suddenly knight e5 is a problem. Yeah, so there could be some issues, and I think that if you already play knight b3, this means you're going to give up the pawn on c5 at some point. Even though black can still play a gambit like b6, c takes, queen b6, and your knight on b3 is weird. I do not like to play chess like this. I think we just gave up our center, our initiative for one pawn, which I do believe is a very small price to pay. So that's why c5 is the best, either immediately or the next move. And Kamsky himself plays e3, and I think that this c takes on d4 is very straightforward. C takes on d4, e takes on d4, and black set up this position where he goes for the quick e5 push. If I was black and I was playing the kings in the defense, I would be going here, probably. Or also, according to an engine, a very good move for black is to play queen b6 immediately. And here queen b3 is not ideal, because guess what? I have a very similar line in my upcoming chessable course, Ready Simplified, from white's perspective. I mean, I'm getting exactly the same line from white. By the way, my chessable course, Ready Simplified, is coming out the second part of February. I don't want yet to announce the date because it might change a bit, but it's coming out very soon, very soon. I'll definitely post news on this. So here the big idea is that black plays d6 and bishop e6. It's a very, very good setup for black. And that's why I don't think it's a good idea for white. So after c5, e3, and queen b6, basically you would have to play a gambit with knight e2. And after queen b2, knight f3, d5, it's something like this. I looked at this line a bit deeper. Black is holding on in every line, so he's walking a tightrope. I found some very interesting stuff. For example, there's this fascinating line. Check this out. Knight e5, black's pretty much only move, I think, is to go here. And now comes the shocking idea. Free knight on d2. If he takes, there's rook b2. Rook b8. So he could take on a1, there's rook c8 checkmate. And he has to go the queen for very unclear position. I don't know who's doing better here. According to the engine, it's just equal. But I mean, there's some interesting lines, and if you want to pursue it yourself, be my guest. I think that not so many players that are going to play c5 early, because you just played c3, and c3 is not a very popular continuation. And most people, I think, they're going to carry out the typical kings in defense, bishop g7, show castle. They're going to look at this, what the c3, and they're going to proceed with their plans. And this is where Kamsky's approach becomes very effective. Also, in the PGN, I decided to leave a sideline because, as I already said, for some guidelines, I looked at Abhijit Gupta's course on modern chess, and so that I have a understanding which moves I should be looking at. I did not use his analysis. I was just looking at the setup, yeah, so that a strong GM tells me what are black's most dangerous responses, and then I will analyze it on my own. So the point is, he was recommending knight c3 with an idea to switch to the Jabava London, and I thought it's very interesting. So I decided to leave it as an alternative in case you are having problems with the main line with Kamsky's approach. I still think it's a pretty good one. Except here after d5, I quite did not like the direction that Gupta was going. He was going for some peaceful stuff. And I think that this e3 is much more to the point, and it's also super, super popular these days. So I'm going to leave it as alternative in the PGN. I'll just show you the main line. There's many lines. Let's say bishop g7, you want to play h4. And the big idea is that you want to go for some kings in attack with h5. For black, it's quite dangerous. You just put the knight on f3, you put the knight on e5, you play queen d2, you play f3, long castle g4. It's just very easy, very easily to play this for white. And ultimately, black is holding on in every single line. Like if he knows this line perfectly, he's holding on. But if he doesn't know this, if he doesn't know that the best move is knight e5, knight e7, long castle, rook d1, and either d4 or knight c6, he just lost on the spot basically. Because if he plays, for example, here rook c8, we already had this idea in one of the earlier chapters. We just dominate the dark squares. Knight e7, boom, 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 boom. Goodbye. Takes, g4. It just feels completely lights out immediately. And that's why I loved this setup. I think it's the perfect setup for the actually the time control games. Because black pretty much has to commit to d5. Because if he doesn't, if he plays the Pirtz approach, there's e4, d6, queen e2, long castle, bishop h6, h4, h5. And the main rule for the Pirtz is that black is not supposed to rush with bishop g7. That's at least how I understand it. He should keep the bishop on f7 or the tiger variation. Yeah, so he should keep the bishop on f8 so that he can launch some attack at the queen side with c6, b5, b4. But now he's committed to bishop g7. I don't think this is very good. And Stockfish also is slaughtering this from white's perspective. So I'm not going to show this right now because I feel it's going into the different direction. You can check out Gupta's course. Some of the ideas I liked, some of them I did not like. I thought they were a bit too vague. But this is something I discovered myself working on ChessBase, that this setup is very easy to carry out, and very often, yeah, it goes to this line. Bishop g4, queen e2, very powerful position for white. Or if he goes, let's say here, let's say this is quite a dangerous line, +1 for white. Black is getting slaughtered immediately with some terrific attacking chances. So basically, you would have to do a couple of lines where black knows this best setup, that he plays bishop f5, bishop e5. He knows this setup, and after rook e1, he knows the move d4, where you just get a slightly better endgame. Maybe it's equal, I don't know, maybe it's not slightly better, maybe it's just equal, but it at least gives me the impression that you're the one who is pushing a bit. Or maybe the other move is that after knight c6, you play bishop h6 for some initiative. And black, again, has to figure it out. g4 is always incoming. So I thought it's fun. And I think this is also a very good reason why this is why Jabava London is so popular. So I'm going to think about this. Maybe I will make maybe I'll make a separate bootcamp about it at some point. So it will make sense. I never quite understood the Jabava London, why they're doing it against everything. But I suppose there's something there. Because according to Stockfish, it's not a big deal. But now that I'm seeing these lines, there could be something. And but anyway, we're going to focus on Kamsky's approach. So we're going to play c3. Or if you want, yeah, we can do the different move order. We could do it like this. But basically what we're trying to do, we're trying to discourage black from playing c5. If black goes here, we play knight f3. Now it's basically the same position. And maybe this is the final chance really for black to play c5 immediately. Because again, this is quite risky. This is quite risky to accept it from a strategical standpoint. And yeah, we play e3. I think the best for black is immediately take on d4 to ask you to define your setup we want to take with e pawn. If you're looking for the simpler game, you can play c takes on d4, knight c3. I don't think you'll be doing something criminally wrong. Should be fine. But this is what Kamsky plays, knight e2, d6. And here's one game that he played against Vladimir Kramnik. It was some rapid game or blitz game. He played h3. I think it's a bit early. And Kramnik played knight h5 and e5. And like this, Kamsky sacrificed the pawn. It's dangerous for black to accept it. And Kamsky was pushing a bit, but ultimately it finished in a draw. But I think that h3 is a bit early. And the more accurate move is bishop e2. Black can still carry it out. Knight c6, short castle, knight h5, bishop e3. And according to an engine, yeah, e5 makes perfect sense. Now we take it, and I think we still have some pressure after knight e4. So the threat is to play bishop c5 and knight d6. And if black plays something like knight f4, probably we are going to kill it. Takes, takes. And the engine likes queen d6 for some reason. So queen d6, takes, takes. Maybe we get some obstacle bishop position where it seems like we are playing with an extra pawn at a queen side. At the right moment, yeah, like here, takes, takes, and take, and maybe you have something here. I don't know. Like, doesn't seem it's a lot. But it's a risk-free position. So, yeah. But I think that there's a very good chance that your opponent is not going to do either of those things. And instead, he's going to play show castle. Now we play knight e2. And here he pretty much he needs to decide, does he want to play the kings in the fence or the Grunfeld? Because if he plays the Grunfeld, we're back to the London approach. e3, c5, secure the bishop against any knight h5. Just a good move. Black could go like c takes, e takes. And here is the most important detail is you put your last bishop on e2. Show castle, knight e4, rook e1. And I think it's also one of the lines we get in the exchange Caracan quite a bit. So you don't put the bishop on d3, you don't take on f5, and you just ignore the bishop on f5. And according to an engine, it's solid advantage to white. So queen b3 to follow here, and you have some pressure. And if black plays knight c6, he keeps the tension. He needs to watch out for d-takes on c5. I think that's like a basic rule from the Queen's Gambit accepted. For white, if white plays d4, c4, knight c3, for black, after the white's knight c3, that's the best moment to take on c4. And here it's quite the same. As soon as black commits to knight c6, very often it's the best idea, best moment to take on c5. So we play knight b3, we protect the pawn, and black has to figure out how to defend it. Ultimately, I think that if you're not going to do this, black's idea is to play knight e7 and e5, which is a common idea from the Catalan. So you need to watch out for the c5, and I don't think you really have a great choice. So if you're going to do this, like here, knight e7, castle, c5, I think is black is just fine. Even though, by the way, engine here finds some mini plus for white. I don't know why. It just feels that black is accomplishing everything he wanted. And the difference is that after c takes on d4, e takes on d4, now this entire approach quite doesn't make any sense because black is going to be left with an isolated pawn on d5. Of course, he can do that, but it just gives you the easier game. So I hope you understand the difference. And yeah, so probably this is one of the main lines. Maybe I should have pushed it a bit deeper, but like I can show you like queen b3, queen d7, rook e1. Let's say he plays some a6, rook d1, some b5, takes, takes. And you're still going to go for some kings at attack most likely. Knight g5, g5, g4. There's one idea. Yeah, so the bishop on f5 suddenly is feeling a lot of heat. But yeah, the pawn structure b2, c3, d4, it shows you should be playing at a queen side. So ultimately, maybe black he's gonna play d6, and now it's e4. What do you call this? It's not even the king's Indian defense. It's something else. Some pirts probably. I'm not really sure. And after e4, here black typically for the king's Indian defense has two choices: either e5 push or c5 push. If he plays c5, white pretty much always gets an opening advantage here. You take on c5, take on c5, and this is a fantastic position because now you control the center, black does not. And black cannot push e5 himself. Even if he does it, it's going to create a weakness on d5, so he is going to have problems with the pawn play in the long run. So the line continues with h3, knight c6, and I liked in particular this idea to play bishop b5, try to create some weaknesses, and if black commits to queen b6, there's suddenly a4, and if black goes here, suddenly after knight c4 takes he's left with million weaknesses in the position. Yeah, so you have a great outpost on c4. This is weak, weak, weak. Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's pretty bad for black. But I mean, you can of course also play something like queen c2, be flexible. Now play a bishop b5, and just play normal chess like knight c4, a4. That's a weakness on b6. This is why bishop b5, bishop b2 worked as a provocation. And this is not liquidating. As you can see, black still has problems because of knight c5. The bishop on b7 is the target. So the line continues a bit, and black is still working very hard to try to stay in the game. That's very unpleasant for black. So I think that this c5 against this particular setup is not the best. Maybe black can go for the e5 push. So the question is how to do it properly. Maybe he can go knight c6. And I think that most players you're going to play against, they're not going to understand what's the difference between knight c6 or knight e7, because they're going to see this position for the very first time. After knight c6, we play bishop e2. If he plays, let's say, knight h5 and e5, which is a very common idea in the king's Indian defense. Also, by the way, this looks awfully familiar to my Ra Lopez video series, which is right now I'm running. The last episode I released was the Fianchetto variation. In case you haven't seen it, you can go and check it out. So here we don't take on e5. Quite similar approach. Shook castle, rook e8, h3, queen c2, take on f4. Otherwise, you're going to play rook e1, rook d1, play the queen side. Keep the tension a bit. And according to our engine, this is a pretty bad position for black. Yeah, you're simply dominating all the squares. Think about some d5, knight e4, knight f5. Big problems for black. Maybe he didn't have to play h6, g5, but why did he then allow the capture on f4? Or maybe the other idea that he can do is to play knight e7 and go for the same idea, except here we are pretty happy to take. Bishop g5, rook e1 with some pressure. And you know what engine says here? With the knight on d7, engine suddenly brings some excitement to the game and says h4 could be a move. With maybe you can cast the long side. Why not, actually? So e5, takes, bishop g5, bishop e3, queen c2 along castle. Looks very nice. And if black is stubborn and he goes for the king side initiative, takes, knight g5, bishop c4, queen h5. Looks pretty bad. Queen e8 is the only move. Queen c2 along castle. There's no f4. Checkmate on h7 is threatening. h6, if you want to have some fun. There you go. Knight e6. Actually, bishop c4 probably is a bit more human. So the point is, it's not very good for black at all. He drops the queen. Yeah, so maybe knight e7 is going to be the main move. Ultimately here, and there's a very important nuance here. I think that normally you want to play queen c2 and keep your bishop flexible, which would be great, because let's say black will play e5, you would take it, and you would play knight e5 and collect the pawn, the queen protects the pawn on e4, and if black would play something like, I don't know, queen e8 maybe, you could play h3, e5, and again take with e5, take with e5, play bishop e3. Your bishop can go to c4, you can play some a4, and it feels nice. There's some pressure here. But I think the problem with queen c2 is that specifically against this, black can play c5, which could be a bit unusual. So he wants to open up the position. Your queen on c2 stands weird. And if you close it, there's rook b8. And I'm not sure I like this. Maybe you can still play something like h3, b5, bishop e2, knight b6, e6 to follow. I'm not sure. Because if you stop it with the casual approach a4, a6, and play a5, feels to be a no-brainer. Black suddenly gets a lot of dynamics here. Meaning you're going to take with a6, there's a pin. Your rook at a1 is undefended. And if you play bishop d3, there's typical Benko gamut idea of knight h5 f5, and your pawn on d5 is quite loose. And it just leads to some big mess. Whatever is this? Sackways the bishop, bishop h7, bishop c5, whatever. It's a crazy position, so I thought, okay, I don't want to look into this any deeper. So bishop e2 is probably the more accurate move. And now your opponent can play e5 immediately, which could be quite difficult for black to figure it out. Because the point is, after knight e5, he would have to understand that there's knight c5 and rook e8 to follow. I think, actually, I forgot to check it. What was here? Queen e7, actually. Queen e7, should castle, and somehow this works. Because the bishop on g7 is hitting the knight on e5. Okay. Like, it's not super obvious for black. And you can still press here for a while, having a completely symmetrical position. I'll push this a bit further. Some mini plus for white, but ultimately it's nothing really serious. And I think a more human approach for black would be to play either rook e8 e5 or queen e8 e5, or something like b6. This makes more sense to me. And now he can play e5. And here probably you can keep attention a bit by playing bishop g5. You want to play some d5, I suppose, the next move. And it's a bit complicated game where you have chances to take over the game. So black's last moves were not very accurate. And already here, like if Engine says that the best move here after rook c8 b3 is b5, you already know that there's something wrong with your chess understanding. Yeah, whatever is b5, I don't understand it. I think this is more human, some Benko approach, and then black is just worse. And finally, maybe black can play rook e8. Now we play h3 to secure our ducks with bishop. Takes, bishop e3. You see there's no knight g4 anymore. Maybe b6, bishop b7, a4. And your idea is to ultimately play at the queen side. Knight f4, bishop f1. And you want to play b4, knight c4, expand, knight f4, maybe make some provocation with bishop b5, c6, then retreat back on f1, followed by knight c4. There's some weaknesses. So there's an easy game. Either way, you're playing at a queen side. And I think that this is ultimately why Kamsky liked this, why he likes this setup from the white's perspective. But like I already said, it's not super effective if black is aware of the plan and he knows that you have to play c5. But even there, yeah, probably this entire sequence of c5, e3, and what was it? This queen b6, very interesting setup, or maybe even the most accurate move order. If you start with this, he is immediately c5 and immediately c takes on d4. Or queen b6, but then we have this weird gambit with knight e2. Or, if you think none of this is super clear, you want to look in the direction of the Jobava London. Yeah, now we're strictly going a bit sideways, because Jobava London is not quite the same as the London it features knight c3, but you are forcing your opponent to play d5, and then you have this simpler idea of knight f3, knight e5, queen e2 f3, long castle g4. Maybe you're going to find it to be more interesting. So go check out the PGN. All right. That being said, this bootcamp episode is officially over. I hope I managed to keep your attention. Couple of things I would like to add at the very beginning, at the very end. Um, I think that it's um, it's a nice system overall, the London opening, but I don't think you can use it in such a simplified way. Like you're gonna play against everything: d4, knight of 3, bishop before e3, c3, knight e2, bishop d3. I don't think it works like that because, as I already showed you, there's a couple of scenarios when it just doesn't work. And London system is very interesting to master because there's so many tricky move orders that your opponent has to know. Like I show you sometimes, why do you play knight e2? Why do you sometimes play bishop d3? Why do you sometimes delay c3? And still, I think that if you understand the core principles, that what your opponent wants to do, what your opponent doesn't want to do, and what are the critical continuations in the opening theory, then it's gonna give you a great head start to understand it. So I think it's very, very worthy continuation from the watch perspective, and I'm thinking that I will definitely include it in my repertoire, at least in some rapid and blitz, just to get this easier game, and then you can try to carry them out. Uh, Ultimately, if you want to study a bit more, you can check out Gupta's course on modern chess. Maybe you're gonna like it. You can definitely get more information on the London on YouTube. Like I know that Alex Banzia is very popular name when it comes to the London. He's made some videos. He has made, I think, also a course on Chessable. I think I also heard during the Speeches Championship that Aman Hambleton is releasing his course on Chessable. That was like 16th February, I think. Was it the London? I think I heard it. But ultimately, the bottom line is I would like to say is that treat this boot camp as your first steps in the London. And if you're really serious about getting more knowledge, and maybe somebody else, a greater expert than me, has a different opinion how London should be played, for example, like Gata Kamsky, he's a living legend when it comes to the London system, go check out their games, their recommendations. And I also would advise you to support the authors who are working very hard to input their time and analysis and make London system as a serious opening choice. Um, Final note: the PGN of the bootcamp contains a bit more variations, but again, don't be thinking that it's a full repertoire. Like there's some extra lines. I explain a couple of things. There's not a full annotation, meaning it's not a course. Like it's my um, file that I use to create this bootcamp. Yeah, like I use it as a reference point, and I have some extra lines that I did not show, like alternatives, interesting directions. So you can use it just to study the London a bit more in depth, maybe as a baseline where you can expand it with your own analysis, or maybe you can throw in some recommendations from some other authors. Like you can create your Leeches study or chess.com study, and you can just create your own source file for your information. For this purpose, of course, you can use it. So I'm going to leave it at the moment during the creation of the bootcamp on my Patreon shop. I have future ideas. I'm planning to expand, but again, if you're looking for something more complete, get a course. Probably the best source is either Chessable or Modern Chess. Actually, on Modern Chess, they didn't really have so many courses on London. Yeah, so basically, I just saw it was basically Gupta's course, and that's it. There was nothing else. So probably Chessable in this regard is much, much better. All right, that being said, thank you for watching this. If you liked it, my video, please press like, subscribe to my channel if you're not there yet. This is going to allow me to create more videos, grow as a content creator, more bootcamps, more educational videos. And yeah, if you have any questions about the London, something I didn't cover, something you didn't understand, use the comment section. Just tell me your thoughts. What do you think about it? And yeah, I hope that you're gonna enjoy it. What else did I want to say? Um, yeah, that's the end of the bootcamp. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.